the 22nd of August 2025. A day that seemed ordinary, yet within 72 hours, 3 shattering events would leave the entire scientific community in disbelief. On the global seismic report, a stark number appeared. 7.9 on the Richter scale, the most violent earthquake in over a decade, striking along the northern rim of the Pacific. Just minutes after the ground convulsed, social media was flooded with images of fractured skyscrapers, surging waves, and terrified crowds fleeing the coasts. But before the world could even catch its breath, a second headline erupted: a sudden G3 geomagnetic storm. Satellite systems began reporting orbital anomalies, commercial airlines were forced to reroute, and auroras spilled downward to latitudes that had once only belonged to dreams. Ribbons of red, green and violet wrapped across the skies over Kansas and northern Japan, breathtaking, but haunted by a strange unease. In that charged atmosphere, a seemingly minor update slipped into the science bulletins. 3IATLAS, the interstellar object first detected the previous month, was now displaying behaviors no one could explain. Both optical and infrared telescopes confirmed it. A faint plasma cloud, stretching hundreds of thousands of kilometers, had enveloped the body. This was no longer a solitary shard of dust cutting across the heavens. It had become a colossal sphere of light, a plasma giant from deep beyond the Milky Way, and it was moving as if to step directly into the chaos Earth was already trembling to withstand. Numbers, usually so dry, now carried an undeniable weight. With every step up the Richter scale, energy release grows tenfold. That meant the quake had unleashed the equivalent of dozens of thermonuclear warheads exploding at once. Meanwhile, the solar storm predicted by NOAA to be nothing more than a mild G1 had surged to G3, shaking the entire global GPS network. And then there was Atlas, its luminous shroud spanning nearly half the sun's diameter, arriving as a third player on the board, forcing humanity to ask, was this a random string of accidents, or had the universe just revealed the opening move in a game far greater than us? The shock lay not only in the facts, but in their impossible convergence. One natural catastrophe alone is enough to shake human confidence, but 3, stacked within less than 3 days, that pushed against the limits of reason. Scientists continued to insist. The quake was tectonic, the storm solar, and Atlas simply a passerby through our system. Yet when you stand in a city split apart, look up at auroras bleeding across the night, and know that a massive interstellar body is bearing down, it becomes nearly impossible to believe this is all just coincidence. Anxiety seeped into every broadcast. Was there a hidden thread tying it all together? Could fluctuations in the magnetic field have triggered fractures already strained beneath the crust? And Atlas, with its vast plasma mantle, was it adding one more variable to an equation unlike anything humanity had ever witnessed? Questions echoed everywhere, from hushed scientific conferences to the frantic keystrokes of millions in online forums. And within that moment, wonder mingled with dread, because even as fear spread, so too did the hunger for answers. This was the once-in-a-millennium chance to realize we are not just passive spectators of a distant cosmos, but participants in its dialogue. A dialogue, fierce and unsettling yet perhaps essential, reminding us that among the endless sea of stars, we have never truly been separate. Those 3 days carved themselves into collective memory, not only for their physical destruction, but for the way they stirred a spreading sense of helplessness. After the earthquake, many coastal cities were forced to evacuate, and hundreds of thousands set up temporary camps. Images of children wrapped in silver blankets under wavering flashlight beams, of elderly clutching the few surviving family photos, became symbols of humanity's fragility against unseen forces. Meanwhile, communication networks continued to falter under magnetic interference, hindering rescue coordination. The world seemed swept into a game whose rules were written by the cosmos, while humans could do nothing but stumble after them in desperation. And yet, within the chaos, another current began to flow: curiosity. The more questions people asked, the more fear entwined with the hunger to discover. At major universities, emergency research teams were formed not only to analyze seismic aftershocks, but also to track Atlas's movements. Screens streamed live telescope feeds throughout the night, conference rooms glowed under harsh lights, and chalkboards were filled with sprawling equations that resembled mazes. Something outside the old frameworks was taking shape, a growing intuition that within this tangled picture, Atlas held the central role, the key fragment that could unlock the whole. The public was hardly passive. Across social platforms, millions of short videos of the auroras spread, mesmerizing in beauty, but also chilling. An American in Nebraska wrote, "I've never seen my hometown sky like this. It's as if some giant hand painted light across it." A woman in Hokkaido confessed, "It's so beautiful, but my heart is racing, and I don't know why, like something is about to happen." These personal testimonies multiplied, weaving together into a collective diary of humanity caught in a strange and singular moment. Meanwhile, scientists faced a paradox. Every phenomenon had its own rational explanation: the earthquake from tectonics, the geomagnetic storm from solar winds, and Atlas as nothing more than an interstellar traveler. But with three crises colliding almost simultaneously, reason wrestled against intuition. At one conference, an astrophysicist admitted, "If this is a coincidence, then the probability is terrifyingly small. And if it isn't, we may be overlooking the greatest link in modern science." That statement instantly became a headline, shared at lightning speed, almost like a collective confession that even science sometimes stands at the edge of uncertainty. Anxiety deepened as forecasting systems continued to flash ambiguous signals. The sun still flared unpredictably, massive sunspots rotating toward Earth, promising more violent plasma storms. Atlas's trajectory, though confirmed not to be a direct threat, was tracked hour by hour because its plasma halo was so immense that no one could fully predict its interactions. On public forums, the most common question was no longer, "Are we safe?" but "How much do we really know?" Here, anticipation reached its peak. Humanity stood between two poles. On one side, the fear of tangible disaster. On the other, the irresistible pull of cosmic mystery. The feeling was like standing at the edge of a cliff below, a bottomless abyss. Ahead, a path no one had ever walked. As Atlas blazed against the darkness, it was no longer just a frozen shard of dust from afar. It became a symbol of both a threat and an invitation. A door that could open to darkness or unlock knowledge humanity had never touched. And even trembling, humanity could not turn away from that door. As Atlas's cloud of dust and plasma continued to swell, expanding across an immense stretch of space, every newscast opened with its name. National broadcasters described it as an object smaller than a mountain, yet producing a halo half the size of the Sunday. Astronomers called it unprecedented, a wanderer from the stars, displaying a power far beyond the frameworks that textbooks had ever taught. Viewers watching the first images from Hubble fell silent, a faint glowing sphere, drifting like a giant lantern through the cosmos. It was breathtaking in beauty, but its beauty carried a chilling strangeness, as though we were gazing at something that did not belong to our solar system. Shock turned to awe as the data was revealed. Atlas's plasma halo stretched nearly 700,000 kilometers, large enough to swallow dozens of Earths without touching its edges. And what unsettled scientists most, it had become active at a distance where comets were normally still dormant, untouched by the sun's heat. This meant Atlas carried ices and substances humanity had never encountered before, an entirely alien chemical signature. It was as if Atlas bore the breath of another star, another planetary system, another cosmic history. From that moment, a profound question echoed. Was Atlas merely a random shard, or a messenger carrying some distant signal? Bold theories began to surface not just in fringe discussions, but within mainstream conferences. Some likened Atlas to a mirror, reflecting humanity's fragility, forcing us to confront the boundaries of our own existence. Others cast it as a challenger, arriving precisely when Earth was already reeling, as if to remind us we had never truly controlled our destiny. Anxiety deepened when computer models suggested that Atlas's massive plasma halo could interact with the solar wind, distorting the magnetic field surrounding our planetary system. This implied that geomagnetic storms in the coming months might prove more unpredictable than ever. One researcher warned, "We are facing the largest natural plasma experiment in history, and the terrifying part is, it isn't happening in a lab, it's happening live, on Earth." The mass media seized the moment, amplifying every emotion. Newspapers splashed headlines in bold. "As the interstellar wanderer arrives, can Earth remain at peace?" Such titles spread at light speed, feeding curiosity while stoking unease. Ordinary people, unfamiliar with concepts like plasma or halos, still sensed that something was amiss, as if a storm was gathering on two fronts at once, the sky and the human mind. Yet within this charged atmosphere, A new kind of wonder emerged, wonder at the limits of knowledge itself. For decades, science had taught humanity to believe we could measure, predict, and control. But Atlas, with its uncanny glow, shattered that complacency. It was a bell tolling in the silence, a reminder that some cosmic secrets will never yield to equations or models, and that sometimes we can only stand, witness, trembling, and in awe. At this point, Atlas was no longer just an object out there. It had become a symbol of fear, born from what cannot be controlled, a symbol of yearning, to grasp what has never been understood, and a symbol of anticipation, for an answer that might one day change the way we see the universe itself. As streams of data poured in from satellites and observatories, a strange pattern began to emerge. Over the past month, every surge in the solar wind had coincided with another expansion of Atlas's plasma halo. Stranger still, just days after each of those expansions, Earth recorded a string of small tremors, quakes subtle enough to avoid destruction, yet strong enough to demand attention. For scientists, it was a statistical coincidence. For the public, it felt like a sinister background rhythm, a steady beat hammering at humanity's collective nerves. A Japanese seismologist wrote in an emergency report, "Perhaps it is all chance, but when the same pattern repeats again and again, we are forced to ask, is there an unseen hand at work?" That question spread quickly, seeping far beyond scientific circles. It was whispered on subways, debated in online forums, and even voiced in quiet prayers. Was Atlas somehow entangled with what was happening on Earth? Anxiety spiked when global communication satellites began to fail in clusters. One evening, millions across Europe lost GPS signals for hours. Airplanes were forced to land manually, and ships reverted to paper charts. In Paris, people gathered on bridges, gazing upward at auroras, blazing crimson like spilled blood, a sight both breathtaking and apocalyptic. And at that very moment, a report from Hawaii confirmed a 6.2 quake had struck off the Pacific coast. Coincidence? Or the pulse of some cosmic rhythm? In this climate, Atlas was no longer a distant point of light on star maps. It had become a character woven into everyday life. Children sketched glowing spheres in their coloring books. The elderly recalled ancient tales of omens written in the skies. Artists painted, composed, and recorded the surreal spiritual climate that seemed to shroud the whole world. Atlas had crossed the boundary of science, entering humanity's cultural memory as something half myth, half physics. But what gripped the world most was the announcement from European observatories. In 3 weeks, Atlas would reach perihelion, its closest approach to the Sunday. Forecasts suggested that by then, its plasma halo might swell to a size greater than the Sun itself. That image alone was enough to quicken the pulse of even the most composed scientists. They knew the moment would be decisive not only for planetary science, but for how humanity would perceive its place in the universe. Media outlets dubbed it the unavoidable appointment with the Sunday. Each day, millions began counting down. The pessimists whispered doomsday scenarios, global geomagnetic storms, continent-wide blackouts, the collapse of satellite networks. The optimists believed it would mark a breakthrough, a once-in-a-lifetime chance to unlock the physics of cosmic plasma. But whatever their stance, all were swept into the same emotional current and anxious anticipation. It was like sitting in a darkened theatre, the house lights fading, the curtains still closed, with the certainty that the next moment would change the air forever. Shock and wonder, fear and anticipation. These emotions now blended like waves breaking one after another on the same shore. No one knew what Atlas would bring, but everyone understood one thing. When that moment arrived, we would never look at the sky the same way again. The countdown began. Across the planet, the phrase 21 days left appeared like an invisible emblem. No institution had declared it, yet media and social networks turned Atlas into a shared clock for the entire world. People no longer asked, "What is Atlas?" but, "How many days until it reaches perihelion?" And with each passing day, tension seeped into the very breath of modern life. Major cities organized public screenings of telescope footage. In Berlin, the central square overflowed with people, their eyes fixed on a massive screen showing Atlas burning brighter. In Tokyo, thousands queued in the rain to enter the exhibition titled "The Halo from the Stars Beyond." Even in towns once indifferent to science, valleys and small parishes filled with whispers of the strange star, as congregations gathered in churches to reread scriptures that spoke of light from afar. Atlas was no longer just a physical phenomenon, it had become a global, spiritual ritual. Meanwhile, the scientific community drowned in torrents of data. Magnetic field maps were updated in real time, twisted curves suggesting Earth itself was being bent by an unseen hand. Computer models ran endlessly, spitting out scenarios ranging from mild geomagnetic storms, bright enough only to paint auroras, to the collapse of power grids, millions thrust into weeks of darkness. But what shook scientists most was a third possibility. If Atlas's plasma halo collided with the solar wind at perihelion, humanity might witness an electromagnetic spectacle never before recorded, a plasma symphony resonating through the solar system. That prospect leaked beyond laboratories, immediately igniting both fear and imagination. In New York, artists staged a light performance, simulating skies cracking into violet ribbons of electricity. In South America, indigenous communities held prayer ceremonies, seeing Atlas as a divine trial for humankind. In technology hubs, satellite companies raced to harden their systems, bracing for the possibility of total signal loss. The world seemed to have entered a rehearsal for the apocalypse. No one knew when the final note would strike, but everyone felt the drumbeat tightening in their chests. Anxieties also took concrete form. Stock markets lurched, gold prices soared, insurance companies rolled out new policies labeled undefined natural disaster. In schools, teachers faltered when children asked, "Miss, if Atlas explodes, will we survive?" Such innocent questions, instead of calming fears, thickened the atmosphere with dread. For even the experts had no certain answers. Yet within this sea of unease, wonder refused to disappear. Each night, as darkness fell, millions lifted their eyes to the heavens to find a peculiar light, neither twinkling like a star, nor sharp like a planet, but blurred like a distant streak of fire. That faint glow grew clearer with every evening, a reminder that the universe was drawing closer, knocking on our very door. And in those moments, anticipation reached its peak. Fear gripped us, yet we could not look away. Atlas had become the central figure of a play unlike any other one, in which all humanity was both audience and actor. Together we breathed in the same rhythm, waiting to see how that vast curtain of plasma would reveal the next act. And though no one dared predict the ending, everyone agreed on one thing: the days ahead would reshape not only the way we looked at the sky, but the way we saw ourselves. The 12th of September 2025. Atlas was less than 48 hours from perihelion. The entire planet felt suspended on a fragile thread, trembling as it awaited the decisive moment. International observatories streamed live around the clock, cameras zooming endlessly on a halo, expanding to dimensions almost beyond belief. For the first time in history, an interstellar object had become the focal point of every broadcast, every conversation, every dream, and every nightmare. The telescope images were no longer just a dull blur. Atlas now appeared as a colossal sphere of light, hovering in the dense black void. Jets of plasma flared outward like enormous arms, whipping through the solar wind and forming fiery vortices stretching hundreds of thousands of kilometers. Each time new footage was released, crowds gathered in public squares, gasped in unison, half in wonder, half in dread. Some wept openly among strangers, others burst into manic laughter, overcome as Atlas's beauty pushed human emotion past the limits of endurance. Meanwhile, the sun itself refused to stay still. A chain of giant sunspots rotated directly toward Earth, hurling streams of plasma at speeds exceeding 700 kilometers per second. Scientists described it as a violent dialogue between two plasma titans, one from our central star, the other from an interstellar wanderer, and Earth, small and fragile, was caught between their exchange. Global magnetic maps displayed wave upon waves, distorted like a lake struck by thousands of stones at once. Anxiety sharpened into near panic as technological systems began to falter. Communication satellites flickered. Several nations throttled internet traffic to prevent collapse. Major cities suffered brief blackouts lasting only minutes, but long enough for rumors to spread. This is only the prelude. Government agencies rushed to reassure the public, yet even their voices trembled. Everyone knew, when cosmic plasma collides, no shield is strong enough to hold completely. And yet, curiosity blazed alongside fear. Researchers stayed awake through the night, eyes locked on charts, desperate to find signals linking Atlas to Earth's seismic unrest. Plasma physics labs recorded values never before observed, as though the entire solar system had turned into a giant experiment chamber. One young scientist whispered to the camera, "If we survive this event, history will call it a new enlightenment." The phrase spread instantly, becoming a rallying cry that filled hearts with both trembling fear and restless hope. On the other side, ordinary people could not look away from the sky. Though Atlas remained too distant for the naked eye to see clearly, the thought of an interstellar torch blazing near the sun kept millions awake. Families gathered on rooftops, on mountain ridges, along seashores staring south and east toward the place where Atlas glowed. The sky was quiet, but inside them, drums pounded. Anticipation had swelled into something suffocating, a waiting so intense that time itself seemed to stretch into eternity. And then, as the clock struck midnight, observatories across the globe released the same announcement. Atlas's plasma halo had surpassed 1 million kilometers. It was now wider than the sun itself. The news raced outward like fire on the wind, plunging the world into a strange, collective silence. No one knew what to do except look up and whisper, "We are witnessing something that has never happened before." The 14th of September, 2025. The moment most anticipated and most feared had finally arrived. Atlas reached perihelion, just 1.4 astronomical units from the Sunday. Its plasma halo swelled to a scale never before recorded, over 1.2 million kilometers, surpassing even the diameter of the central star itself. Observatories reported a scene that bordered on madness, the sun ablaze in fury, and beside it, a pale colossal sphere of plasma looming like a phantom. Two entities of light, one the source of life, the other an interstellar mystery, stood side by side, as if tearing the sky of science open into an unwritten page. In that instant, it felt as though humanity held its breath together. Meetings stopped. Financial markets paused. Streets fell quieter than usual. Everywhere, people turned toward live broadcasts, or simply looked out their windows, knowing their naked eyes could never capture the whole. Children asked their parents, "Is this the end of the world?" The only answer their parents could whisper was, "We don't know, but we are living in history." Anxiety surged as the first anomalies appeared. Electrical grids in parts of South America flickered, entire cities pulsing on and off as though some giant hand flipped a cosmic switch. Observation satellites detected geomagnetic storms suddenly intensifying, solar plasma streams bending unnaturally as they collided with Atlas's halo. A NASA engineer exclaimed before the cameras, "This isn't any model we've ever known, it's the confluence of two massive plasma storms." His words were instantly etched into history. Yet what stole the world's breath was not just the threat to infrastructure, but the sense of witnessing something beyond language itself. The James Webb Telescope captured scenes of plasma streams, violet and amber ribbons intertwining, coiling around one another in the void, glowing like a vast cosmic dance. Some scientists called it an electromagnetic symphony between two cosmic beings. The press dubbed it the dance of light and shadow. But for those watching live, words failed. Many simply wept, uncertain whether their tears came from terror or from awe. Burning curiosity now crossed into obsession. Was Atlas merely a comet, or something more? As its plasma wove into the suns, detectors began registering anomalous electromagnetic pulses, regular, rhythmic beats, unlike anything ever seen. A Swiss research team released preliminary findings. They had detected steady pulses, as though Atlas were broadcasting a rhythm of its own. No one dared to conclude, but rumors spread swiftly. Atlas was not just a visitor, it was a messenger. The world hung in suffocating suspense. Some believed it was an omen of the end. Others believed it was an opening, a chance for humanity to witness, for the first time, how interstellar plasma interacts with the heart of our own system. And caught between fear and hope, one truth could not be denied. Atlas had become a massive mirror, reflecting humanity's inner life. No longer distant, it had stepped into the very sky of the human spirit. When perihelion passed, the halo slowly dimmed, but the echoes remained. Trembling power grids, auroras unlike any ever seen, and above all, the overwhelming sense that we had just witnessed something beyond ordinary knowledge. Shock and awe, fear and anticipation, all compressed into a silence no words could quite describe. Atlas moved on, but the world was no longer the same. Every heart carried the same question. Was this merely a physical event, or was it the universe whispering to humankind? Just as Atlas passed perihelion, and it seemed the heavens might quiet down, another unexpected phenomenon unfolded. It was not Atlas alone, but a procession of comets that suddenly appeared, like a cavalry of light charging onto the cosmic stage. On the night of the 17th of September 2025, observatories around the world confirmed at least 4 new celestial bodies were brightening, moving across the sky at the same time as Atlas. They posed no direct threat to Earth, yet their eerie synchronicity sent a chill through the world. One Atlas had already been overwhelming enough, but now Atlas was no longer solitary. It moved with an escort, as if the universe itself had staged a never-before-seen congress of comets. To the naked eye, the night sky revealed only a few faint streaks, but through the power of modern telescopes, the vision appeared mythic. Atlas, a giant with a plasma halo larger than the Sun, followed by smaller but radiant comets, each trailing icy tails millions of kilometers long. The sight led journalists to call it the Parade of Interstellar Messengers. Scientists, more cautious, simply whispered, "This is the rarest moment in the history of modern observation." Astonishment no longer remained confined to labs and observatories. It rippled across the planet like an electric current. In South America, fishermen looked up and murmured that the sea god had lit torches for them. In Africa, entire communities sang ancient songs beneath the strange glow, calling the comets the herd of guiding stars. In Europe, thousands gathered in public squares, binoculars in hand, determined to witness a moment they knew would never return in their lifetime. All were bound together by the same sense of reverence. The night sky had become a colossal theatre, and humanity nothing more than a small audience. What overwhelmed people most was the sheer scale. Normally, a single comet would be enough to ignite global fascination, but here were 4, even 5, appearing at once at the exact moment Atlas shone at its peak. Researchers likened it to a cosmic symphony, with Atlas as the lead voice, the other comets as harmonies, weaving together a staggering orchestral score across the stars. This synchronicity defied every predictive model. No software, no calculation, had ever forecast a comet season so dazzling. Yet alongside the wonder, unease could not be erased. Massive dust tails sweeping through the solar system always left behind trails of debris. Even without a direct collision, they could cross Earth's orbit in the future, spawning intense meteor showers or even hurling small asteroids into the atmosphere. Some scientists cautioned, "Do not lose yourself too much in the spectacle. Remember, each streak of light is millions of icy fragments hurtling at tens of kilometers per second." That reminder sent shivers through observers. Beauty has never stood apart from fear, and at that intersection of beauty and dread, reverence reached its height. People felt the presence of something far beyond their understanding. It was as if Atlas was not only drawing 4 or 5 comets behind it, but pulling human consciousness itself into a dance we could not refuse. In that moment, every civilization, every language, every border dissolved. Only one reality remained. The sky was rewriting its own story, in ink made of light, across an infinite black page. Night of the 20th of September, 2025. Millions of eyes turned skyward. People said Earth had never witnessed a light show so strange. Atlas remained the centerpiece, yet around it, like satellites orbiting a distant kingdom, 4 other comets blazed, each trailing glittering tails millions of kilometers long. They were not merely streaks of light, they were colossal brushstrokes across space, transforming the dome of the cosmos into a surreal painting no artist would dare attempt to recreate. In the Atacama Desert, under the clearest skies on Earth, astronomers stood silent for hours. They were accustomed to comets, to dry streams of data. But tonight, before their eyes unfolded something beyond academic language. One researcher whispered, "I have spent my whole life watching the heavens, yet I have never seen them so alive. It is as though a cosmic hand is painting on black canvas with the light of ice and dust." That whisper was recorded, carried across the world, and quickly became a shared quote of the age. Far north, in the Arctic, auroras tangled with comet light, creating a sight both mystical and terrifying. The heavens exploded with color green, violet, crimson, gold twisting ribbons coiling like dragons in flight. Children squealed with joy, adults fell into silence, and scientists scrambled to recalibrate instruments to capture every electromagnetic fluctuation. A foreign correspondent, broadcasting live, choked on his words. "I feel as though I am standing beneath the dome of a vast cathedral, with the universe itself as the high priest offering prayer. Excitement in the scientific community surged to a fever pitch. This was a once-in-a-lifetime chance. Multiple comets visible at once, just after Atlas's perihelion. Observatories launched their comet swarm programs, logging every particle of dust, every plasma ripple, every flicker of light. Data streamed in so fast that systems had to be upgraded on the spot. A plasma physicist exclaimed, "We are no longer just observing. We are living inside the greatest experiment the universe has ever given us." The thrill spread widely, for they knew, each number, each graph might rewrite centuries of human understanding. Yet beneath the euphoria, unease lingered. Comets always left dense trails of dust in their wake. In the coming years, Earth's orbit could intersect those trails, triggering violent meteor storms or even hurling small asteroids into the atmosphere. Early warning networks began flashing red, risk spike detected. And so, alongside cheers came emergency meetings about aviation safety, power grids, telecommunications. Humanity stood both awed by beauty and shadowed by potential catastrophe. This celestial spectacle placed humankind in a state of double overwhelm, overwhelmed by surreal beauty and overwhelmed by looming uncertainty. Watching Atlas lead its comet procession, many described the feeling as witnessing a cosmic pilgrimage, travelers from faraway realms crossing our star system, reminding us that Earth is but a fragile speck in a vast symphony. And in that moment, reverence swept over all. No longer blind fear, but genuine humility before the immensity of space. Humanity lifted its gaze and understood. No matter how far science advances, there will always be moments that force us to bow before grandeur beyond expression. Atlas and its comet companions had transformed the heavens into a temple where all of humanity spoke in unison. We are witnessing a miracle. Since humanity first looked up at the night sky, there had never been a moment like this. Multiple comets entering the solar system at once, with Atlas at the forefront, majestic, mysterious, and unlike any other. Research institutes across the globe quickly dubbed it an open universe experiment, for though none of it followed human design, it unfolded perfectly for testing countless theories generations of scientists had only dreamed of proving. The Alma Observatory in Chile began detecting unusual radio frequencies emitted from Atlas's dust tail. Data revealed plasma particles colliding, flaring, producing rhythmic, electromagnetic echoes. In Switzerland, CERN, known for probing nuclear particles, joined in, using its sensors to capture microscopic dust drifting into the atmosphere. Meanwhile, NASA and ESA launched CometNet, a campaign linking 43 satellites in synchronized observation. For the first time, Earth acted as a single organism, eyes and ears tilted upward, listening intently to the story Atlas was telling. Excitement rippled through laboratories worldwide. An astrophysics professor at Cambridge described it this way: "We are witnessing living data. No more assumptions, no more simulations. Everything, ice particle decay, plasma streams, the refraction of light through dust is happening right before our eyes." His words made students cheer, researchers weep, and audiences everywhere watch as if attending the most breathtaking live performance ever staged. But alongside the thrill, a sharper worry grew. Models suggested that as Atlas and its companions shed dust into space, those trails would intersect Earth's orbit in the years ahead. If the particles were small, they might create dazzling meteor storms, but larger fragments tens of meters wide could pose genuine threats to cities. One scientist spoke bluntly, "We have opened the greatest laboratory in history, but we are also stepping into the most dangerous game of chance." Still, the prevailing feeling was one of awe. Awe not only at the risks, but at the scientific revelations. That night, plasma physicists watched, for the first time, as the solar wind bent under Atlas's massive halo. Astrochemists collected spectral data and identified complex organic compounds never seen before. A Japanese team even suggested Atlas might carry prebiotic molecules, seeds of life, from another star system. If confirmed, it would mean humanity was staring at direct evidence for the theory that life itself could have been delivered by comets. The press hailed it as a once-in-10,000 years opportunity. Young scientists described the feeling as standing at the opening ceremony of an entirely new science. They knew the data from Atlas and its comet entourage would not just rewrite a few pages of textbooks, it could turn the page to a whole new chapter of human knowledge. The beauty of the sky, the fear of hazard, the thrill of discovery, all fused into one pulse, resonating across humanity. Atlas, once just a frozen, distant shard of dust, had become a living emblem of science, at once a challenge and a gift. And even as streams of numbers continued to pour across screens, the sense of awe and reverence did not fade. On the contrary, it grew stronger, as if humankind had just unlocked the hidden hall of the universe itself. The excitement had barely settled when waves of warnings began to surface. The Global Asteroid Warning Center released a new report. The massive dust trails shed by Atlas and its cometary companions had begun to intersect with the orbital paths of planets in the solar system. Simulations suggested that even the slightest gravitational shift could pull fragments into Earth's trajectory. The chance of collision was not certain, but it could not be dismissed. Even a 0.1% probability was enough to send defense agencies and governments into emergency discussions. A U.S. Two official admitted, "We may be witnessing both the greatest opportunity and the greatest threat in human history." Anxiety spread quickly. Airlines drafted contingency plans for surprise meteor storms. Cities urged citizens to stockpile food and water, not because disaster was inevitable, but because uncertainty itself had become a haunting presence. Social networks filled with posts that blended terror and wonder, so beautiful it steals your breath, and so terrifying it makes your heart stop. Humanity trembled and marveled at once, knowing that such magnificence lay far beyond control. In laboratories, the graphs grew wilder by the day. Space radars detected small meteors already flaring in the atmosphere. Night after night, across Asia and the Americas, people looked up to see fire streaks cutting through the heavens, meteor showers denser than any in recent memory. Scientists assured the public that most were harmless. Yet the sight of blazing fireballs exploding overhead left people with the eerie sense that Earth was receiving cosmic warnings. The media only deepened the unease. Sensational headlines blared. Is Atlas the cedar of doomsday? As the comet horde turns the sky into a maze. Is Earth still safe? Readers shuddered, but could not look away. Television networks even began counting down the days until Earth would officially cross one of the comet trails. It was as if the heartbeat of the world had been suspended in a giant hourglass, each falling grain carrying a throb of dread. And yet, within the flood of fear, reverence still reigned. Scientists could not look away from their priceless data. They spoke of plasma restructuring, of comets carrying complex organic molecules, of the chance to directly observe life's potential traveling through the cosmos. They knew, if Earth survived this period without catastrophe, the knowledge gained could alter the direction of science for centuries. Fear did not extinguish their excitement, it fused with it, forming a dual state of emotion, trembling yet radiant, anxious yet uplifted. Ordinary people, too, were overwhelmed by the cosmic scale. Many confessed they went outside each night simply to witness the sky ablaze with comet tails. A student in Brazil wrote, "I have never felt so small, and yet, for the first time, I feel that I belong to the universe." Such personal notes flooded social media, becoming a collective archive of emotions where worry and wonder blended into a vast human mural. Atlas and its comet procession had accomplished what centuries of science had never achieved, uniting all of humanity in a single, shared emotion, fear, astonishment, and reverence woven into one. A paradox, yes, but also proof that the universe always finds a way to make us pause, listen, and ask, do we truly understand the place we call home? As Atlas led its procession of comets across the heavens, humanity began to feel the weight of its own helplessness. Optical, radio, and infrared telescopes all turned toward a single point, yet even as petabytes of data poured in each day, they could not fully capture what was happening. Atlas was no longer an object defined by size or orbit. It had become a living structure, an immense field of energy, stretching outward like a dome encompassing the entire solar system. Each new image released left viewers speechless. The companion comets arced around, forming colossal bands of light that looked like pillars supporting the roof of the cosmos. Some writers called it a cathedral of light, with Atlas as the giant candle at its center and the other comets as a fiery choir. Human language seemed exhausted in the face of such an astronomical scale. No earthly metaphor felt adequate. A deeper sense of awe came from its rhythm. Astronomers noticed that Atlas's plasma halo did not expand chaotically, but in pulses like a heartbeat. Every 11 hours, its brightness surged, then subsided, then swelled again. No comet had ever been recorded doing this. A young scientist, her voice trembling, declared, "It is as if Atlas is breathing, and we, unknowingly, are listening to the breath of a being from beyond the Milky Way." She's not today, unried. That idea plunged the world into a state that mixed wonder with unease. People were overwhelmed not just by blinding light, but by the sensation of standing before some colossal living entity, or at least a natural mechanism beyond all definition. Many began calling Atlas the interstellar lamp, a symbol no longer tied solely to science, but to faith, reverence, and a mystery without a name. In great cities, collective viewings turned into cultural events. In New York, thousands crowded into Central Park, eyes fixed on a giant screen streaming live images from the James Webb Telescope. In India, hundreds of monks gathered on the banks of the Ganges, lighting lamps and chanting under the comet glow. In South Africa, musicians performed beneath the open night, letting their songs intertwine with the spectacle in the sky. Humanity, without plan or coordination, had entered a new ritual, the ritual of awe before the vastness of the universe. Yet even as reverence spread, so did unease. New models showed that if Atlas's halo continued its rhythmic expansion, it could disrupt the solar wind for months. That meant Earth's power grids and communication systems would be forced to live under prolonged uncertainty. A telecommunications engineer sighed, "Yes, it's beautiful, but if just one solar plasma storm peaks at the same time Atlas expands, we'll be watching the entire planet go dark." The warning added a chilling edge to the wonder. And still, rather than turning away, humanity leaned closer. For when faced with scales beyond comprehension, the natural response was not only fear, but humility. In that moment, people understood, human knowledge is but dust before the vast wall of the cosmos. And in that recognition of limits, a new door opened, the hunger to learn more, to go deeper, while knowing we would never reach the end. Atlas and its comet companions had become a colossal mirror, reflecting humanity's smallness yet also its pride. Awe was no longer just an emotion. It had become a form of enlightenment, the realization that we live in a universe far too immense to possess, and far too beautiful to stop looking at. Atlas and its procession of comets did not remain confined to laboratories or telescope screens. They stepped directly into the cultural life of humanity. Within weeks, from Asia to Europe, from Africa to the Americas, countless new rituals emerged. People were no longer merely observing, they were seeking to connect with this cosmic event through art, religion, and collective memory. In Mexico, tens of thousands gathered at the ancient Mayan pyramids. They believed their ancestors had once foretold the festival of the long-tailed stars, and now that prophecy had come true. They lit torches, beat drums, and danced beneath the dim spectral sky. In Japan, Shinto shrines held special ceremonies, calling Atlas Omoikane no Hikari, the light of cosmic wisdom. Priests in white robes raised their heads and chanted, treating the comets as reminders for humankind to live in harmony with nature. Across Africa, Bantu communities named the comet caravan the herd of light. They believed each comet's tail was an ancestral spirit guiding them forward. Nighttime fire festivals unfolded, where children drew Atlas in the sand and elders told old stories beneath a sky ablaze. In Europe, Christian churches organized special services, reading scripture about light from afar. Choirs sang hymns, transforming the moment into a sacred mass so powerful that even atheists attended just to feel part of something larger than themselves. Art ignited as well. Painters created vast murals portraying Atlas as the cosmic eye. Musicians composed the Comet Symphony, blending strings with radio waves captured from Atlas's dust tail. Filmmakers rushed to record the sky, hoping to craft the greatest documentary of the century. Songs spread across social media, with hypnotic melodies that left listeners shivering, yet deeply moved. Atlas had escaped the boundaries of science. It had become a fountain of creativity for all humankind. At the same time, apocalyptic fears also surged. In the United States, thousands gathered in bunkers, convinced the night of comets was the final day. In the Middle East, some sects declared it a divine punishment. Online, conspiracy theories spread like wildfire. Atlas was a probe from another civilization, or the comet fleet was an army of asteroids destined to sweep Earth clean. Fear spread as quickly as wonder, creating a paradoxical atmosphere, half celebration, half obsession. What was staggering was this. Never before had the entire globe reacted simultaneously to a single event in the sky. Every culture, though different, found in Atlas and its comet companions a symbol of its own. For Africans, it was the ancestors. For the Maya, prophecy fulfilled. For scientists, a living laboratory. For artists, a wellspring of inspiration. And for the masses, undeniable proof that they were living through a rare moment when the sky itself became a common language, transcending every border. Reverence, this was the feeling that enveloped all. Humanity knelt not from compulsion, but from choice. They understood they were facing something too vast, too radiant, too mysterious to explain, and in the silence of the heavens, they heard a single voice. You are not the center. You are only part of the eternal dance. That reminder, whether born of light or shadow, was enough to make humanity, together, bow its head. The 25th of September 2025. Atlas and its comet procession pressed deeper into the inner system, blazing as though hosting a secret congress in the sky. Astronomers likened them to a cosmic round table, where each comet was a chair, and Atlas sat at the center, orchestrating the entire symphony of light. On live broadcasts, the sight was overwhelming. 5 massive dust tails fanned outward in 5 directions, like enormous banners planted across the black canvas of space, while Atlas itself burned on, its plasma halo expanding like a radiant crown. Awe surged to its peak. People no longer saw Atlas and the comets as cold, inert chunks of ice and dust, but as a cosmic council entering our star system. Philosophers declared this, the moment humanity was forced to confront its place. We are but temporary tenants on a fragile blue grain, while the universe moves to laws far beyond our imagination. A philosophy professor in Paris wrote, Atlas answers none of our questions, yet its silence tolls like a church bell. It forces us to look in the mirror and ask, who are we, truly, in this universe? The scientific fervor had not cooled. Research institutes dubbed this the first global assembly the cosmos had ever convened for humankind. From Beijing to Boston, online conferences stretched through the night, debating possibilities. Was this a sign the solar system itself was entering a larger cycle of interaction? Could life on Earth merely be one fragment in a cometary dance spanning billions of years? There were no answers, but the questions themselves ignited the imagination of an entire generation. Still, unease persisted. New reports showed that one of the massive dust trails would intersect Earth's orbit by 2027. The risk was uncertain, but enough to sow long shadows of anxiety. On forums, Atlas and its companions were called the judges, arriving not to punish immediately, but to remind us that our survival is always at the mercy of the cosmos. The thought chilled hearts, yet also seeded new awareness. Fragility is the very reason life is precious. On the social stage, humanity remained split, half fearing apocalypse, half enthralled by wonder. Yet at a deeper layer, a consensus was forming. Whether disaster or miracle, Atlas had given humankind a gift, the chance to feel connected, to remember we all live under the same sky. Religious leaders, scientists, and artists alike admitted. This was one of those rare moments when people stopped dividing, looked upward together, and exhaled in unison. Awe. The grandeur lay not only in the light but in the symbolism. Atlas and its comet assembly felt like an ancient council arriving from the edge of the universe, reminding us, the cosmos does not belong to us, we belong to it. And it is precisely in bowing to that truth that humanity finds a new strength, the strength of humility. As the comet caravan slowly drifted away, its echo lingered. People knew the scientific data would be studied for decades, but Atlas's greatest gift was not in charts or numbers. It was in the moment humanity simultaneously felt both small and magnificent, small in our fragility, yet magnificent in our ability to look up and be astonished. Atlas never spoke a word, yet its silence became the most powerful speech the sky had ever delivered. Late September 2025. As the dazzling afterglow of the Comet Festival faded, an entirely different atmosphere quickly took hold. Tension and unease. Atlas had passed its peak, its vast plasma halo beginning to disperse, yet monitoring systems showed no sign of a tranquil sky returning. On the contrary, data from NASA and ESA confirmed that the Sun was entering the most turbulent phase of its 25th activity cycle. Enormous sunspots some 3 times larger than Earth had appeared, slowly rotating to face our planet. Scientists called this the sun's labored breathing. Each time a sunspot opened and closed, a stream of plasma burst forth, racing at more than 700 kilometers per second. When these streams slammed into Earth's magnetosphere, they unleashed geomagnetic storms of growing intensity. If in August the auroras had astonished millions, they now flared with alarming frequency, spreading to latitudes never before recorded. Residents of southern Spain, and even Egypt, reported seeing bands of red and green ripping across the night sky. The sight was breathtaking, but to scientists it was a blaring warning. Unease deepened as these events stopped being distant curiosities. On September 27, a G4 class geomagnetic storm knocked out multiple communication satellites for several hours. GPS systems veered off course, throwing hundreds of civilian flights into confusion. On the ground, cities in North America and Northern Europe reported localized blackouts lasting minutes. Several power plants were forced to shut down circuits to protect the grid. The damage fell short of disaster, but the message was clear. Earth had entered an electromagnetic storm zone, where any day could deliver unpredictable disruption. In nightly news broadcasts, one phrase echoed: "Atlas has passed, but its aftershocks remain." Many experts argued that Atlas's enormous plasma halo, colliding with solar winds, had triggered distortions that made the current solar cycle even more chaotic. Others pushed back. There's no direct evidence that Atlas interfered. The sun was already at its peak. Yet the debate could not erase the reality. The skies were unstable, and Earth was being hammered by wave after wave of electromagnetic strikes, like hammers pounding against a fragile shield. The suspense seeped into every headline. Was this merely the natural climax of the solar cycle, or was something larger unfolding? Could the next storm rival the infamous Carrington event of 1859, when telegraph networks worldwide collapsed? Citizens grew restless, governments tightened in apprehension, and scientists found themselves in an impossible role, asked to reassure, while admitting that the uncertainty was too vast for any confident answer. Warnings multiplied everywhere. Airlines urged contingency plans for navigation failures. Tech companies feared mass satellite paralysis. Global data banks prepared offline backups. A cybersecurity analyst remarked, "We live in an age of absolute dependence on technology, yet a single plasma storm could make it all as fragile as shattered glass." And so, in just a few days, the world shifted from awe at the beauty of Atlas and its comet companions to a climate of acute anxiety. Everyone sensed the game was far from over. Atlas might have moved on, but it left behind a dangerous legacy, the revelation that Earth stood amid colossal currents of energy we could barely control. The feeling was like living beneath a cracked ceiling, never knowing when it might finally collapse. The 30th of September 2025. Every space monitoring system lit up with red alerts. A massive cluster of sunspots had appeared, stretching more than 200,000 kilometers, large enough to swallow multiple Earths side by side. NOAA called it a colossal crack on the surface of light, while observers described it as a black eye staring straight down at our planet. The images captured by the Solar Dynamics Observatory alone were enough to chill the spine. A blazing sun, marred by vast dark scars, primed to hurl uncontrollable torrents of plasma. And just as predicted, on October 1, a colossal coronal mass ejection erupted. A stream of plasma shot out at 900 kilometers per second, expected to strike Earth's magnetosphere within 48 hours. International news networks immediately ran flashing red banners. Super solar storm on the way. A state of emergency spread quickly. Residents in Canada and Northern Europe were warned of potential widespread blackouts, airlines rerouted flights, and satellite companies switched systems into safe mode to avoid damage. But what unsettled the public most were the eerie auroras appearing even before the plasma arrived. On the night of September 29, skies over Texas and Florida, places that had never seen auroras, suddenly glowed with violet-green ribbons. In North Africa, across the Sahara Desert, thousands of people witnessed blood-red streaks tearing through the heavens. The spectacle was both stunning and ominous. A reporter described it. "It's as if the sky has turned into the stained glass of a vast cathedral, and behind the glass you can almost hear the faint sound of something cracking." NASA and ESA released streams of data, but instead of easing fears, they ignited debate. One camp of scientists insisted this storm would peak only at G3, enough for dazzling auroras, but not dangerous. Another camp disagreed. Given the 900 km per second speed, the event could easily hit G5 on par with the catastrophic Carrington event of 1859. Social media exploded. Optimists accused scientists of exaggerating to secure funding, while pessimists claimed governments were deliberately hiding the worst-case scenario. Suspicion spread like wildfire. Ordinary people no longer knew whom to believe. They saw auroras with their own eyes, noticed GPS signals glitching, phones losing service for minutes at a time, yet official statements kept insisting, nothing serious is happening. The contradiction deepened collective unease. What was truly unfolding above their heads? On October 2, the plasma stream slammed into Earth's magnetosphere. Geomagnetic instruments worldwide recorded violent fluctuations. In Norway, parts of the power grid wavered, and some regions plunged into darkness for hours. In the United States, several transoceanic internet cables reported outages, leaving millions unable to connect. In Japan, a 5.2 magnitude earthquake struck almost simultaneously, fueling fears of a link between solar activity and seismic events. In emergency summits, one haunting question echoed: did Atlas stir the sun? Many scientists dismissed the idea for lack of evidence, but the thought haunted the public. After all, was it a mere coincidence that after thousands of years of relative stability, the sun erupted with such fury just as Atlas entered the system? Perhaps it was a coincidence, but if not, it meant humanity was stepping into a cycle of unprecedented chaos, with Earth reduced to a pawn in a colossal plasma game. Tension and dread wrapped around the globe. People waited breathlessly, uncertain if the superstorm would spiral into disaster, doubtful of official reassurances, feeling as if they were living beneath a glass ceiling vibrating with each tremor. And every statistic, every kilometer per second, every Tesla unit ceased to be mere data. They became the pounding ticks of a countdown clock. As the plasma stream swept across Earth, its concrete consequences began to surface in daily life. What once existed only in scientific charts has now become a lived experience, wrapping the world in a blanket of tension. People no longer merely heard astronomers debate, they saw with their own eyes familiar technologies trembling like fragile wires in the storm of space. On October 3, the global GPS network faltered, drifting 20 to 50 meters off course, enough to force countless flights to reroute. A pilot landing in Chicago admitted, "For a moment we were flying blind. We couldn't rely on the satellites. It felt like going back to the 1950 seconds." Airlines rushed out bulletins, demanding extra fuel reserves and stronger ground communication. A wave of unease rippled outward. With just a slightly larger error, the consequences could have been devastating. At sea, hundreds of container ships reported temporary loss of contact, pushing captains back to paper charts. Smaller fishing boats in the Pacific lost their bearings. Some were only found days later. The news rattled coastal communities. For the first time in decades, they saw clearly the fragility of global navigation. The internet was no exception. Major providers in Europe and North America reported up to a 40% drop in international connectivity during peak hours, as undersea fiber optic cables buckled under geomagnetic interference. Users complained of speeds crawling back to the dial-up era. Entire platforms collapsed temporarily. Social media swarmed with the hashtag number #DarkNetDay, half satire, half dread. If this is just the overture, can we survive the full symphony? On land, the power grid trembled violently. In Sweden, a wind power station had to shut down after abnormal surges rippled through its systems. In Canada, several transformers caught fire, painting the sky a hellish red. Firefighters subdued the blaze in time, but the image of flames rising from a power station left residents shaken. A witness confessed, "We saw fire erupting from the substation and instantly remembered the warnings about solar storms. No one imagined a star millions of miles away could light a blaze right in our backyard." Distrust deepened. Governments insisted, all incidents are under control. Yet when people saw their phones go dead, their Wi-Fi blink out, their streetlights flicker, trust eroded quickly. Many suspected officials were concealing harsher truths. Conspiracy theories spread like sparks. Some claimed Atlas had warped Earth's magnetic field. Others believed governments were hiding catastrophic forecasts to prevent panic. The atmosphere thickened, like a storm cloud pressing low across the entire sky. Research agencies issued fresh alarms. The European Space Agency released a report. If the Sun continues ejecting plasma at current intensity for the next 10 days, we face a tangible risk of widespread infrastructure disruption, including electricity, telecommunications, and transportation. Media headlines blared, "Countdown to global breakdown." Anxiety hardened into obsession, every statistic now tolling like a warning bell suspended above humanity's head. In this climate, tension seeped into every breath. City dwellers watched streetlights flicker and felt their hearts race. Drivers noticed GPS delays and broke into cold sweats. Internet users saw their connections falter and suspicion spiral. No one stood apart. The solar storm had descended from the heavens, threading itself directly into human life, turning the world into a stage where each person was not only a spectator, but also an actor in an unfolding, unpredictable play. As technological and infrastructure failures mounted, the scientific community, long regarded as the beacon of reason, was itself thrown into an unprecedented internal battle. Numbers, instead of providing certainty, became ammunition for opposing conclusions. And it was precisely this division that unsettled the public most. If even the experts could not agree, who could offer answers? On October 5, NOAA released a preliminary report stating that the current geomagnetic storm was only at G4 level, within manageable limits. They assured the public, the threat of global catastrophe is not imminent. Yet at the same time, an independent research group in Sweden published data showing geomagnetic fluctuations twice as intense as NOAA's figures. Their warning was stark. If this trend continued, just one more solar eruption could trigger a Carrington 2, an event capable of crippling the entire global power grid. The debate erupted instantly. Supporters of NOAA accused the Swedes of sensationalizing to draw attention. The opposing camp countered, government agencies are deliberately downplaying because they fear panic. On public forums, citizens split into two camps. Some clung to the hope that our defense systems were strong enough, while others insisted disaster was only days away. But the discord was not confined to storm intensity. A deeper, more explosive question loomed. Was Atlas connected to this chaos? A team of plasma physicists in Japan argued that Atlas's enormous halo, when passing near the Sun, had distorted solar winds, producing anomalies never before observed. They presented computer models suggesting lingering plasma aftershocks, like ripples on a lake, were still stirring, amplifying electromagnetic waves beyond normal levels. Meanwhile, many experts in the US and Europe dismissed the hypothesis outright. There is no direct physical evidence that Atlas is large enough to affect solar activity, a NASA scientist declared. We are simply at the peak of solar cycle 25. That is the real cause. But such denials failed to quell public doubt. If not Atlas, why did the timing feel so uncanny? International media wasted no opportunity. Headlines blared, "Atlas the invisible hand, agitating the Sun, and science divided. Are we being deceived?" Each article poured fuel onto the fire of uncertainty, swinging public emotion wildly between skepticism and fear. In online scientific conferences, the atmosphere grew heated. Some debates stretched for hours, with experts hurling data points like weapons. One researcher even stormed out, exclaiming, "Science cannot be just numbers. We are living inside a real experiment, and even though we don't yet understand where we stand." Far from calming listeners, this admission only deepened their anxiety. Ordinary people followed the quarrels with breathless unease. They did not expect instant answers, but the sight of divided experts doubled their dread. It was as if humanity were aboard a ship sailing straight into a storm, while the navigators argued over which way the compass pointed. Global security agencies began moving independently. The European Union activated an emergency grid project. The US and Russia both deployed backup satellites. Japan tested offline data storage systems. These actions, instead of soothing nerves, rang like alarm bells. If the danger truly was minimal, why was everyone bracing for the worst? And so, while the sky blazed with auroras and the earth shook with disputes, the dominant feeling across humanity distilled into two words: tension and unease. No one knew what was truly happening, but everyone understood one thing: uncertainty itself was as dangerous as disaster. October 8. A 300-page report from the Global Institute of Geoscience was released, and it instantly became the focus of the planet. The report not only addresses geomagnetic storms, but also lists a cascade of extreme events that have struck since late August. In just 6 weeks, Earth had endured more than 120 earthquakes above magnitude 5, twice the long-term average. Among them were 3 over 7, 2 accompanied by small tsunamis. At the same time, Europe reeled from historic floods, the United States sank beneath a Category 5 superstorm, and Australia endured record-breaking heat waves. Researchers highlighted a detail that made readers shiver. Many of these events occurred right after major solar eruptions. The 7.9 quake in the Pacific coincided with Atlas's violent plasma outburst. Floods in Germany and the Netherlands followed a G4 geomagnetic storm. Australia's heat spike hit just a week after the colossal sunspot rotated toward Earth. The statistics were not absolute proof, but enough to suggest a disturbing pattern of connection that unsettled the world. A seismologist wrote, "If this is a coincidence, then we are living through the strangest era in meteorological history. But if there is truly a link, it means cosmic energy is funneling directly into Earth, shaking both its surface and its climate." The statement was shared millions of times, striking a chord. No one was willing to believe this was just a chance anymore. Television news filled with looping graphics, the sun exploding, plasma streams racing outward, followed by earthquakes, storms, tsunamis. Red arrows connected the data points into dense webs. Anchors spoke with trembling voices. Each connection might be random, but when they all appear together, the picture is impossible to ignore. Anxiety turned into breathless suspense. People clung to every weather update as if it were a suspended death sentence. Apps were downloaded by the millions just to track solar storm alerts by the hour. Each time NOAA announced CME approaching Earth, social media ignited. Some stocked up on batteries, others joked darkly, "Kiss the Wi-Fi goodbye." Insecurity seeped even into humor, becoming the bitter joke of the age. Not everyone accepted the statistics. Many scientists warned against premature conclusions. "We cannot pin everything on the Sun or Atlas based on a handful of correlations," a professor at Oxford cautioned. But such restraint only deepened suspicion. Are they hiding something? Have Coulombi's 4 teams. While debate raged, governments and militaries began upgrading defenses. Japan expanded its seismic sensor network and linked it directly to satellites. The US launched an underground power grid initiative. Russia tested magnetic shielding technology against plasma waves. These measures, instead of calming, only heightened public fear. Clearly, those in power were preparing for the worst-case scenario. The tension climaxed when a news broadcast showed crimson auroras engulfing the Arabian Peninsula. The anchor hesitated. This is no longer a rare spectacle. This is a reminder. The universe is knocking. The image, carried simultaneously on hundreds of channels, became an icon of dread, beautiful, yet unmistakably a warning. As the frightening statistics were laid out like links in an undeniable chain, humanity felt, for the first time, cornered. Tension and unease were no longer abstract concepts but daily existence. Every tremor, every auroral flare, every phone alert became a possible harbinger of something greater on the horizon of a cosmic wrath drawing closer. The United Nations convened an emergency session in New York. For the first time in history, the agenda was not war, disease, or economics, but the threat of solar storms and cosmic instability. The Secretary-General opened with a chilling line: "If the Sun continues to operate at this intensity, we must prepare for the scenario of global disruption." The words, broadcast live and replayed endlessly on every news channel, sent the entire planet into a state of red alert. Governments immediately raised civilian warning levels. The United States issued guidelines urging households to stockpile backup batteries, dry food, and drinking water for at least 7 days. The European Union warned of the risk of widespread blackouts, recommending telecom companies reduce bandwidth loads to prevent network collapse. In Japan, Shinkansen bullet trains were ordered to slow down as a precaution against signal failures. These measures, unprecedented in peacetime, only deepened public unease. If things were truly not serious, as optimistic scientists claimed, then why was the entire world preparing as if for doomsday? The military also joined the stage. In the US, the Pentagon activated protective protocols for all military satellites. Russia test-launched space defense missiles, citing the need to shield strategic infrastructure from geomagnetic storms. China announced the development of a plasma-proof power grid. These rapid-fire moves spread like wildfire through the public consciousness, fueling suspicion. Did world leaders know something the people had not been told? The media wasted no time stoking the flames. News tickers screamed in bold, "Countdown begins. Global solar storm approaches. Atlas and the sun. The game isn't over." Some tabloids even spliced images of Atlas beside the sun with headlines like, "Plasma twin blades." Every page, every headline felt like a drumbeat, quickening the pulse of humanity. In cities, the atmosphere grew uncanny. In London, supermarkets overflowed with crowds grabbing candles, batteries, and bottled water. In New Delhi, neighborhoods erected makeshift shade tents, fearing blackouts would drive temperatures dangerously high. In New York, lines of cars snaked around gas stations, tanks filled as if a blizzard were about to strike. But this time, the storm wasn't from the atmosphere. It was from the distant cosmos, invisible to the naked eye. Cybersecurity experts added their warnings. If the storm hit hard enough, not only power grids but also banking systems, stock markets, and medical databases could collapse. A report circulating online declared, "We no longer live in an age dependent on technology. We live in an age shackled by it." And a single plasma storm could snap that chain. The words pushed anxiety to its peak. Humanity was walking on thin ice, hearing it crack beneath their feet without knowing when it would give way. Through it all, the question of Atlas lingered. Though it had already passed perihelion, many believed its plasma aftershocks still amplified the sun's volatility. Scientists remained divided, but the public no longer cared about evidence. To them, the truth was simple. Atlas appeared, and the world has not been calm since. The day dragged on under suffocating tension. The global mood resembled a theatre moments before the curtain rises. The lights had dimmed, the audience held its breath, and all that remained was the pounding of the drums. Warnings from governments, militaries, and media all struck like drumbeats, relentless and unyielding. And humanity, no matter how calm it pretended to be, understood one thing. Never before had we stood so close to the fragile edge between order and chaos. October 15. The world seemed to sink into a hollow of silence. After weeks of warnings, every eye was fixed on Noah's countdown clock, predicting that a new solar storm would strike Earth within 24 hours. Cities glowed under artificial light, yet the atmosphere felt like the air before a thunderstorm. Heavy, tense, expectant. People still went to work, still shopped, still sat down to dinner with their families, but deep down, everyone knew that at any moment, the lights above could flicker out, dragging an entire world into darkness. International broadcasters streamed the countdown live, marking every passing hour. Across the screen, a red banner scrolled relentlessly, "CME approaching." Experts sat stiffly in studio panels repeating the same phrase over and over. We can't say for certain, and it was that uncertainty more than the storm itself that terrified people most. Disaster can destroy, but uncertainty leaves humanity directionless. And so, billions sat before their screens, holding their breath for the sky's verdict, like prisoners straining to hear footsteps in the corridor outside. At midnight, the auroras erupted. From South America to Southeast Asia, the heavens blazed with green and crimson ribbons, as if Earth were veiled beneath a burning tapestry. Crowds poured into the streets, necks craned, eyes wide, caught between awe and dread. Children shouted with delight, as if watching fireworks, while adults stood silent, eyes shimmering, knowing the spectacle was no celebration, but a warning, a plasma storm tearing at the magnetosphere. Then the malfunctions began. In Brazil, the power grid flickered, leaving neighborhoods in darkness for hours. In Switzerland, subway trains ground to a halt as signals failed. In the US, multiple satellites suspended transmission, cutting millions off from the internet. No global catastrophe struck, but countless small failures rippled across the planet, each one a test slice, like knives pressed experimentally into the body of civilization. In control centers, tension was unbearable. Engineers stared at flashing red monitors, fingers trembling on keyboards. One muttered aloud, "We are just paper boats on a river of plasma." The phrase was recorded, broadcast, and quickly spread online as the symbol of the moment. And then, the strange twist. After hours of turmoil, systems slowly steadied. Lights flickered back on, the internet reconnected, and planes touched down safely. The world exhaled, yet it was not relief, not fully, because everyone knew this had been luck. If the storm had been stronger, if Atlas had still been closer, perhaps there would have been no one left to exhale. In that moment, a deeper unease took hold. Humanity does not control the sky. We have satellites, supercomputers, predictive models, but all of it is nothing more than a thin coat against the cosmic wind. And so the philosophical question emerged, whispered in minds everywhere. Can humanity truly survive in a universe defined by uncertainty? Or are we merely fragile travelers, waiting on the mercy of plasma storms? When dawn broke after the night of blazing auroras, the sky returned to its familiar blue. Yet inside, the shadow lingered. People sat in cafes, scrolling phones that once again connected, but their eyes still carried a quiet fear. They knew this was just one turn in an endless cycle of instability. Atlas had passed on, but it left behind an undeniable truth. Earth exists in an unstable universe, and tension anxiety may well become the permanent condition of this new age. The 18th of October 2025, just as the world was breathing a sigh of relief, believing the solar storm had finally eased, a new series of tremors erupted, this time not from the sky, but from the depths of the ocean. Seismic sensors across the Pacific registered an unusual chain of vibrations, not strong enough to cause immediate destruction, but relentless, pounding like war drums rising from the ocean floor. Early reports called it Earth's irregular heartbeat, and the phrase alone was enough to sow a slow, gnawing fear. At dawn on October 19, a 6.8 magnitude earthquake struck off the coast of the Philippines. Minutes later, the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center issued its first alert. Sirens wailed along the shores of Luzon as hundreds of thousands of people poured into the streets, clutching belongings, racing uphill. No one hesitated. Memories of the 2004 Indian Ocean disaster returned like a haunting shadow. People trembled not only in fear, but in shock, realizing that what had begun in the sky had now drawn the oceans into humanity's fateful game. The first waves were not towering, less than 2 meters high, but they were strong enough to rip fishing boats from their moorings and turn streets into raging channels. A video spread rapidly across social media. A fisherman stood on the roof of his house, staring helplessly as his boat was swept away, his hands trembling in disbelief. The image chilled millions. A tsunami did not need to rise tens of meters sometimes. A single unexpected surge was enough to etch terror into memory. The sea was no longer a friend, but an enemy lying in wait. In laboratories, the question arose, were these tremors random or somehow linked to the recent solar storms? Some geophysicists pointed to the magnetosphere tectonic theory. When the magnetosphere is violently disturbed, the transferred energy might place additional stress on Earth's mantle, triggering seismic activity. Though hard evidence was lacking, the idea spread quickly, deepening suspicion. Had Atlas not only stirred the heavens, but also awakened the oceans? Meanwhile, early warning technology proved its worth beyond measure. Geostationary satellites, working in tandem with thousands of seabed sensors, sent out alerts within 3 minutes of the quake. Because of this, millions were able to evacuate in time. Newspapers hailed it as science's victory over death. Yet that admiration was overshadowed by a darker thought. If these systems now had to operate so frequently, then humanity was truly living in an age of unprecedented instability. As night fell and the waves receded, the fear did not. Evacuees lay awake in crowded shelters, ears still ringing with phantom sirens. Children clutched their parents, whispering, "Will there be more waves tomorrow?" No one could answer with certainty. And it was this uncertainty, more than the quakes or the waves themselves, that cut deepest. A tsunami might rise 1 meter or 10, a quake might measure 6 or 9, but what truly made people tremble was not knowing when, where, or how the next strike would come. Across the Pacific Rim, from Manila to Tokyo, from Jakarta to Honolulu, a chill crept into every coastal home. People listened to the news, read the scientific updates, but in their hearts, only one image remained. The ocean was whispering something, and this time, it was not a lullaby. It was a warning. October 20. Less than 24 hours after the quake off the Philippines, seabed sensors near the Mariana Islands registered another alarm. This time, the tremor struck at a magnitude of 7.4, more than 30 kilometers beneath the ocean floor. Within 2 minutes, tsunami warning systems in Japan, the US, and Indonesia activated in unison. Sirens wailed, piercing through an atmosphere already thick with fear. In Tokyo, loudspeakers echoed across the city. A tsunami may strike within 30 minutes. Move to high-rise buildings or designated safe zones immediately. Crowds surged into the streets, funneling toward evacuation points. Live drone footage captured the sight of endless streams of people, some clutching children, others dragging suitcases, eyes fixed on the horizon as if waiting for a colossal shadow to rise from the sea. In Jakarta, the scene was even more chaotic. Coastal sirens blared non-stop, mingling with panicked screams. A woman clutching her child whispered, trembling, "We only heard the news a few hours ago, and now the sirens won't stop. No one knows where to run." Volunteers in red vests shouted through megaphones, struggling to direct the flood of people, but fear drowned their instructions into little more than echoes. Honolulu showed a different picture, technology working at its best. Emergency alerts hit millions of phones at once. Tsunami warning, evacuate now, remain calm. The terse, urgent words jolted people from their beds in the middle of the night. They spilled into the streets, cars racing toward the mountains, forming endless ribbons of red taillights across the highways. The media called it a river of light, a lifeline of urgency that technology had transformed into a collective instinct. The terror now came not just from the sea, but from the clock. Every passing minute was a scissor cut, shortening the distance between humanity and an invisible wall of water. People looked at one another, listened to the sirens, and asked the same silent question: will we make it in time? It wasn't the wave itself that haunted them, but its looming shadow, suspended above the world, forcing billions to hold their breath. In the operations centers, scientists stared at screens with bloodshot eyes. Every seismic graph was enlarged, every sensor signal triple-checked. A weary engineer in Guam confessed between heavy breaths, "We're no longer analyzing, we're racing against time." For the first time, science was no longer classroom theory or controlled experiments. It was a frontline battle measured in minutes of survival. Yet amid the urgency, doubt crept in. People began to ask, why are these tsunamis chains striking so soon after the peak solar storms? Did Atlas leave some echo in the oceans? Experts refused to conclude, but the coincidence was enough to turn fear into obsession. If the cosmos could stir the deep sea, then humanity truly had nowhere safe to hide. In Manila, a man carrying his young daughter whispered as he ran, "Thank God the sirens came in time." The simple remark, recorded by a journalist, became a symbol of gratitude for warning systems, a reminder that even fragile humanity could still craft tools to seize fleeting chances of survival. But it also carved a deeper dread. What happens on the day the system falls silent? As night descended, millions slept fitfully in evacuation centers, ears still echoing with phantom alarms. The sea outside lay deceptively calm, but inside the human heart, the wave only grew higher. Fear and dread were no longer passing emotions, they had become the shared heartbeat of every soul living along the Pacific's edge. October 21. As the sun rose, the first true waves struck land. In eastern Philippines, the city of Tacloban, once a symbol of devastation during Super Typhoon Haiyan in 2013, once again became the epicenter. A wall of water more than 3 meters high slammed into the coast, sweeping away boats, houses, and cars like plastic toys. Sirens blared, but the wave came too fast, leaving many with no choice but to climb onto rooftops. The sight of hands waving desperately amid the white foam was broadcast live, turning television screens into mirrors reflecting humanity's deepest fear. In Indonesia, the Aceh region scarred forever by the 2004 tsunami was struck once more. A wave 4 meters tall surged ashore, swallowing entire fishing villages. Children clung to the shoulders of adults, eyes wide in terror, mouths screaming, while a mother cried out the name of her missing son. Field reporters choked back tears. This is no longer a memory of the past. This is its return. And it's even more haunting because we knew it could happen. And we were still powerless. Videos filmed by ordinary citizens stunned the world. On Japan's coast, a wave barely 1.5 meters high still carried enough force to lift dozens of cars, spinning them like dry leaves in the wind. Another clip from Papua New Guinea showed a wave flooding through a schoolyard, miraculously sparing lives because students had already evacuated after receiving an early warning text. These details inspired both horror and awe. Technology had saved thousands, yet it could not erase the images seared into memory. Strangely, the waves followed no predictable rules. Some places saw only small surges, while others were hammered by towering walls of water. Scientists were baffled. Why does the same quake produce triple the waves in one region and barely a ripple in another? Some speculated that unstable magnetic fields from recent solar storms had amplified the transmission of energy beneath the ocean, making tsunamis erratic. The theory spread quickly, feeding suspicion. Perhaps sky and sea were conspiring in a game beyond human reach. Evacuation centers overflowed. Families huddled on cold tile floors, eyes blankly fixed on screens streaming non-stop news. When footage of Tacloban's wave appeared, many burst into tears, even if it wasn't their city. In that instant, they realized it could be anywhere, anytime. The terror wasn't just in the destruction itself, but in the fragility they felt coursing through their veins, as if the very ground beneath their feet could transform into an ocean without warning. Amid chaos, small stories of survival glimmered. A young girl in Japan said she survived because her smartwatch received an alert. A fisherman in Indonesia lived thanks to an old battery-powered radio broadcasting the warning signal. These fragments stirred admiration for human resilience and the ingenuity of technology, yet they also reflected a darker truth. Survival hinged on mere minutes of warning, fragile signals from machines, and sometimes sheer luck. On social media, the hashtag #WavesOfFear spread like wildfire. Millions shared images, videos, and prayers. One photo became iconic. A man sat motionless on a flooded rooftop, clutching an old guitar, his eyes staring directly into the lens. Fear, helplessness, and resignation all burned in that gaze. The picture was christened "The Face of the Ocean," so haunting that many broadcasters blurred it when airing. The waves eventually receded, but their scars lingered, not only in shattered homes, but in a fractured collective psyche. The ocean had carved a fresh wound into humanity's memory, a wound that would not easily heal, because it carried a reminder. Every time the sirens blare, death may already be rushing toward shore at hundreds of kilometers per hour, and humankind, despite its technology, remains nothing more than a fugitive beneath the shadow of the waves. October 23. After the first waves devastated Southeast Asia's coastlines, global attention did not stop at grief and loss. Another storm began to rise this time, a storm of debate. Journalists, scholars, politicians, and ordinary citizens alike were swept into a massive discussion. Was there truly a connection between the solar storms, Atlas, and this chain of relentless tsunamis? That morning, a team of geophysicists from Kyoto University released a preliminary report. They had found a suspicious alignment between the strongest solar storms and the recent undersea earthquakes. This cannot be dismissed as a coincidence, the lead researcher insisted. When the magnetosphere is shaken at maximum intensity, the Earth's mantle registers unusual vibrations as well. International media wasted no time, splashing headlines. Atlas and the Sun may have awakened the ocean. 2. In the Maychow, test of Smayfam. But almost immediately, the Western scientific community pushed back. A professor at Caltech emphasized, tsunamis are triggered by tectonic motion. There is no physical evidence that plasma or solar storms can displace geological plates. His article in Nature was widely circulated, standing like a cold, firm wall, insisting humanity should not tumble into mystical speculation. Yet to the public, such denials felt detached, unable to explain away the glaring synchronicities. On social media, the argument caught fire. One side declared, Atlas opened an invisible gate between sky and sea. The other scoffed, blaming a comet is easier than admitting our warning systems aren't perfect. Videos of auroras, glowing the same night tsunamis struck, were shared millions of times, captioned with a simple challenge. Coincidence? The doubts twisted fear into obsession. If there truly was a link, then humanity was staring down a cosmic cycle of disasters with no escape. Scientific conferences turned into battlegrounds of data. In Geneva, one debate dragged on for 12 straight hours. Advocates of the cosmic connection presented models suggesting that when solar wind strikes the magnetosphere, the uneven distribution of pressure could ripple down and stir the mantle. Their opponents dismissed it. These are hypothetical models. In reality, no evidence shows the energy is sufficient. The tension rose so high that one researcher stormed out, muttering, "We are guessing, while the ocean does not wait." While the experts clashed, ordinary people chose their own truths. In Japan, the Philippines, and Indonesia, they looked at blood-red auroras in the sky, then down at the rising seas, and they believed instinctively that there was some link beyond equations. For them, doubt needed no formula. It was enough that the waves always came after the storms. That alone was enough to seed nightmares. Ironically, those very doubts magnified respect for early warning technology. People argued over causes, but everyone agreed. Without satellites and seafloor sensors, the death toll would have been exponentially worse. Engineers, long invisible in their quiet labor, suddenly became heroes of the age. In refugee shelters, families pinned photos of rescue teams and technicians to tent walls, calling them guardians of the ocean's gate. The world seemed caught between two poles. On one side, fear that the strange coincidences spelled doom. On the other, awe at the power of technology to save lives. Suspicion hovered between them like a cloud that would not clear. People wondered, was science hiding something, or was science itself simply powerless in the face of chaos? The days passed, waves receded, skies cleared, but the question remained suspended in the air. Had Atlas merely passed by, or had it torn open a crack between cosmos and ocean? That question became a ghost clinging to humanity, leaving us trembling long after survival. After days of relentless tsunamis, the world began to grasp a double-edged truth. We are living in the shadow of annihilation, yet at the same time shielded by the thinnest technological net humanity has ever built. Every moment between life and death, between being swallowed or escaping in time, now depends on chips, algorithms, and satellites hanging in orbit above. The global tsunami warning system, established in the wake of the 2004 catastrophe, was for the first time pushed to its full capacity. From sensors planted deep beneath the Pacific floor to geostationary satellites tracking sea level shifts, all worked together in an emergency symphony. When a quake struck, signals were transmitted in under 180 seconds, 3 minutes seemingly brief, yet those very 3 minutes saved hundreds of thousands along the coast. In Hawaii, one family recounted the moment they received the alert on their phone. The message came at 3 a.m. Within 5 minutes we were on the highway heading for the mountains. 10 minutes later, the wave came and swallowed the neighborhood. The father held up a cracked phone to the camera, his voice trembling. "This device saved my family." That testimony spread across the globe as a symbol of awe. Humanity may be small, but it has forged tools capable of snatching life back from the ocean's grip. The operations hub in Jakarta, where hundreds of engineers worked day and night, became the artificial heart of the Pacific. They monitored every vibration, every jagged line across the screens. One young engineer whispered, "We're no longer scientists, we're gatekeepers." And indeed, to the millions fleeing outside, these nameless engineers were silent warriors holding back the invisible power of the sea. Artificial intelligence also stepped into the arena. Supercomputers in Switzerland and California were linked to simulate wave propagation within minutes. Data from thousands of sensors were processed by AI, producing real-time tsunami risk maps. The visuals' red rings spreading across the ocean filled viewers with both dread and admiration. Dread, because they revealed humanity's fragility on a map. Admiration, because technology had turned cold data into warnings of life and death. Yet alongside admiration came a darker realization: absolute dependence. People began asking, what if one day the satellites fail under a solar storm? What if AI miscalculates the data? What if the seafloor sensors go silent? Do we still stand a chance? These questions transformed technology itself into a ghost, haunting the collective mind, both savior and source of fear. In Manila, a 10-year-old boy admitted he keeps his phone by his pillow every night, afraid of missing an alert. In Japan, households began placing emergency backpacks by the door, stocked with power banks and shortwave radios. Such habits revealed how technology had become an invisible death clock. It not only saves lives, but forces people to live in constant tension, waiting for the next alarm to sound. International journalists coined this the paradox of salvation. Humanity raises its head to praise the triumph of technology, while bowing it again in humility, realizing how fragile we are when our very survival hangs by it. And in this paradox, awe and dread merged into a strange new energy, making the world both proud and trembling. On the night of October 25, as warning bulletins grew fewer, an engineer in Honolulu posted online, "We survived by numbers, but don't forget the sea and the sky do not count numbers." "We are only lucky." This time, his words spread like wildfire, for they captured the most haunting truth. Technology can delay, but it cannot erase the fury of the cosmos. And humanity, no matter how proud of its inventions, still shivers beneath the colossal shadow of the ocean. After nearly a week of sirens and waves crashing one after another, the world entered a different phase: social chaos. If the ocean had sown seeds of physical fear, humanity itself amplified them into a storm of the mind. In many Pacific Rim cities, panic buying swept through the streets. Supermarkets were emptied within hours. Batteries, candles, and bottled water turned into gold. On social media, rumors spread faster than any wave. A 30-meter wall of water will arrive in 3 days. Atlas has awakened the monster beneath the sea, and even the government is hiding the true doomsday scenario. Groundless though they were, those words were powerful enough to keep millions awake at night, eyes glued to their phones, scanning the sky and sea for a sign of the end. Governments had no choice but to release official statements of reassurance. Yet, ironically, every time they said there is nothing to fear, public doubt only deepened. One resident in Jakarta remarked, "They said the same thing before, and the next morning the wave came." That simple sentence spread like wildfire, serving as living proof that faith in authority was cracking at its core. Meanwhile, the global economy began to shudder. Shipping lanes were disrupted as vessels were rerouted away from unstable waters. Oil prices spiked, dragging inflation upward. Stock markets reeled. Tech giants lost billions, as undersea internet cables faltered again and again. Analysts called it the economic tsunami, a chain of financial aftershocks stretching outward from the ocean's wrath. Fear seeped into the smallest corners of daily life. In Hawaii, many parents kept their children home from school, haunted by the thought of a sudden surge. In Japan, families abandoned coastal homes altogether, hauling belongings to mountain villages that turned overnight into makeshift refugee camps. In Chile, churches overflowed, bells tolling deep into the night, as if people were trying to use faith itself to bargain with the sea. Within this chaos, disinformation became as dangerous as the waves. A doctored video showing a giant wave racing toward California went viral, racking up millions of views in hours. Traffic gridlocked as residents staged a spontaneous evacuation. Only later did officials declare it fake, but by then the damage was done. Trust had fractured. People began to believe shadowy, unofficial sources more than the official ones. And that collapse of trust itself became the silent wave, undermining the very foundations of society. Yet even in the dark, small lights flickered. Volunteer groups set up hotlines to verify rumors and broadcast verified alerts. Engineers, once invisible, suddenly emerged as unlikely heroes. A Filipino technician who worked 48 sleepless hours in a control room to keep the warning system alive was hailed as the guardian of the sea. These stories, rare though they were, planted seeds of admiration in the forest of fear. Still, the dominant emotion was haunting. Humanity came to realize that tsunamis destroy not only coastlines but also trust, stability, and the fragile fabric of political and economic life. A sociologist wrote, "Physical waves arrive and recede, but psychological waves remain. They spread through social media, through lies, through suspicion, and no seawall can hold them back." When night fell, the ocean's murmur sounded like a warning. People lay awake in evacuation centers, hearts pounding, as if the waves were already at the door. And they understood, even when the real surge had passed, society was still drowning in another tide, the tide of chaos, fear, and unrelenting obsession. October 27. The Pacific Ocean returned to a deceptively calm surface. The violent tsunamis had withdrawn, leaving behind mud-stained beaches, overturned boats, and shattered rooftops. Yet the silence did not bring peace. It felt like a ragged breath after a nightmare, quiet but trembling, because everyone knew the ghost of fear had not gone anywhere. In evacuation centers, people began returning home, but their eyes still carried shadows of dread. A child stared at the sea and asked his father, "Will it come back?" The father lowered his head in silence, knowing he could not promise what even science dared not guarantee. In every coastal city, the tsunami evacuation signs suddenly became emblems of the age, reminders that within mere minutes, the ocean could transform from postcard scenery into a deadly hand. International media called it a global psychological disaster. not just because of the death toll or destroyed homes, but because the waves had carved a new question into humanity's collective subconscious. If Atlas could shake the seas themselves, what else might lie ahead? That question spread like a shadow across every newspaper, every broadcast, every whispered prayer. After weeks of fierce debate, the scientific community too began to shift its tone. No longer declaring with certainty there is no connection, they now spoke more cautiously. We need more research. We don't know everything yet. That admission late, though it was left the public both unsettled and oddly reassured. At least this time, science had chosen honesty in the face of uncertainty. In the days after the disaster, another side of the story also emerged: admiration. People built small memorials to honor engineers, volunteers, and even the machines that had saved millions. In Japan, a group of students painted a massive mural of the Atlas, one satellite shining above a raging sea, with the words, "3 minutes saved us." The mural went viral, a reminder that even in the shadows of terror, humanity could still find reasons to admire itself. And yet, the dominant emotion was still fear, lingering, unshakable fear. A sociologist wrote, "No one looks at the sea the same way anymore. Even when it lies still, we see in it fragments of burning memory." Those memories were not just of the waves themselves, but of the chain of visions. Blood-red auroras, relentless solar storms, the comet Atlas glowing with a colossal halo, all layered together into an invisible engraving etched into the collective mind. On the night of October 27, as faint auroras still stretched across the skies of the northern hemisphere, many sat awake on beaches, unwilling to sleep. The ocean whispered like a conspirator, and people asked themselves, Atlas is gone, but has it truly left? Or has it left behind a new heartbeat within the earth? One that the waves we saw were only the first echoes of. That question haunted them as deeply as the tsunami itself. And so, main idea 4 closed on a cold truth. Humanity was no longer afraid only of solar storms above or tsunamis below, but of uncertainty itself, the abyss between science and belief. Atlas had, in some inscrutable way, turned both the sky and the sea into mirrors reflecting the fragility of humankind. And in that reflection, we saw both our pitiful smallness and our enduring strength, the strength to run, to warn, to save one another in the face of catastrophe. The waves had receded, but the haunting remained. And perhaps, for generations to come, every time a siren wails, humankind will shiver again, remembering October 2025, when the ocean spoke and Atlas carved its mark forever into our collective memory. The 30th of October 2025. As humanity was still drowning in the aftershock of fear left by the tsunamis, a discovery stunned the world. The Next Generation Arecibo radio telescope in Chile unexpectedly detected strange radio signals emanating from the plasma halo surrounding Atlas. These were not the usual random bursts one might expect from a comet. Instead, they appeared in steady rhythm like a heartbeat, precise down to the very second. Scientists immediately released the data. The graphs showed sharp pulses, repeating in a pattern far too deliberate to be dismissed as a coincidence. One physicist gasped, "The frequency looks like ancient Morse code, short, long, short, long. It doesn't resemble any kind of emission we've ever known." That statement spread across international media, leaving millions in shock. Was Atlas not merely a frozen ball of dust and ice, but a messenger carrying a signal from some distant corner of the cosmos? Inside the control rooms, the atmosphere was a mix of exhilaration and tension. Sequences of numbers were magnified on screens, while dozens of AI algorithms were unleashed to decode them. Some early results suggested that Atlas's signal carried an uncanny harmony, echoing the Fibonacci sequence, the series that appears everywhere in nature, from the spiral of seashells to the rhythm of DNA. The coincidence sent chills down people's spines. Could this be the universal language of the cosmos, with Atlas as nothing more than its courier? Global reaction erupted. Headlines blared. Is Atlas speaking? The first message from beyond the solar system? Social media became a storm of speculation. Some believed it was the trace of an ancient civilization. Others dismissed it as a complex plasma phenomenon. But whatever the truth, curiosity had already slipped beyond control. One comment, shared millions of times, captured the mood. Whether random or intentional, the miracle is that we are hearing the heartbeat of the universe. At Cambridge University, a young mathematician transformed Atlas's signals into sound. He converted the radio pulses into musical notes and played them in a lecture hall. The entire room fell silent. What emerged was not chaos, but a minimalist harmony, solemn, resonant, and repeating. Many wept, not because they understood, but because they felt they were listening to something beyond the reach of the human mind. A philosopher remarked, "Perhaps Atlas is sending no message at all, but the fact that we hear music in the data proves our imagination has already leapt beyond fear." The world slipped into a state of exhilarated bewilderment, excitement, because imagination had opened a door never seen before. If this was a message, humanity might finally not be alone. Unease, because no one truly knew what it was, signal, accident, or illusion born of our hunger for meaning. And mystery, because in the cosmic dark, Atlas suddenly became a living figure, a silent messenger that seemed to breathe, to pulse, to plant questions deep into the human heart. Religions quickly entered the conversation. Some popes, lamas, and clerics declared it the whisper of God through the mirror of the universe. Artists began calling Atlas the storyteller of light. Scientists remained cautious, but even they could not deny. For the first time in history, a comet was not only illuminating the skies, but astonishing humanity because it seemed to speak. And so, at the end of October 2025, the world stepped out of the terror of tsunamis, only to enter a new labyrinth, the labyrinth of curiosity, of imagination, of unanswered questions. If Atlas were a messenger, what message did it carry? And if it was not, then why did the universe sing in rhythms that sounded like a song? Astonishment turned into a thirst for understanding, and humanity fixed every eye, every antenna, every restless mind on that distant halo of light. Soon after the Atlas signal was announced, the world's major research institutes launched into a decoding race. In Boston, MIT's laboratory diverted its entire supercomputer array to process the radio waves. In Paris, a computational linguistics team attempted to translate the signal into written structures. In Beijing, AI specialists trained neural networks to compare Atlas's signal against billions of natural sound samples. And in Geneva, a group of philosophers and interdisciplinary scientists gathered in a seminar room to ask a bigger question. What if this isn't just data, but a message? The algorithms began to reveal anomalies. Atlas's sequence was not entirely random. Across thousands of pulses, the repetition ratio mirrored the pattern of prime numbers. The discovery stunned the scientific community because primes have long been regarded as the universal language of the cosmos. From Carl Sagan's contact to countless SETI theories, scientists have assumed that if any civilization wished to send a greeting, they would use prime numbers. And now, Atlas seemed to be pulsing in the same rhythm. An astronomer at Harvard remarked, "If this is a natural phenomenon, it is uncanny that it carries such mathematical precision. And if it is not natural, then we may have just heard someone knocking from afar." The quote appeared on the front page of the New York Times, igniting a wave of debate unlike anything before. Meanwhile, other research teams approached the signal through entirely new lenses. In Berlin, a digital artist converted the pulses into images. On the screen appeared a glowing spiral eerily similar to the structure of DNA. The room fell silent. No one knew whether to call it a coincidence or to see it as a whisper that life on Earth and life beyond might share the same underlying score. Excitement surged, but so did profound unease. Many scientists warned, "We must be cautious. Humans are prone to finding meaning even in noise. Perhaps Atlas is only a comet, and we are weaving illusions." Yet such cautionary words could not extinguish the blaze of imagination. On Reddit, one user wrote, "Illusion or truth? The miracle is that all of humanity is trying to decode a rhythm from the stars together." The comment earned hundreds of thousands of upvotes, proof that sometimes the value lies not in the answer, but in the search itself. Inside laboratories, the mood felt like the eve of history's greatest exam. Scientists stared at glowing monitors as streams of data scrolled past like hidden text. A Swiss engineer confessed in his journal, "We no longer tell day from night. Each time the signal repeats, my heart races. It feels like knocking on a door. I fear what might be on the other side, but I cannot resist the urge to listen." The United Nations convened emergency sessions not to discuss war or disaster, but philosophy. If this truly was a message, how should humanity respond? Some leaders were exhilarated. "We are living in the prologue of cosmic history." Others were unsettled. "We don't know who is on the other side." And thus, for the first time, humankind confronted the question, should we answer when we hear a voice from the void? Amid the dim glow of observatories, surrounded by flickering screens, humanity trembled and marveled all at once. Astonished because science and science fiction had suddenly merged, deeply curious because every dataset opened a door no one had ever stepped through, exhilarated because imagination was finally free to roam, uneasy because no one could say if we were looking at the truth or only staring into a mirror of our own longing. Atlas drifted silently onward, saying nothing more. Yet in its steady, pulsing rhythm, it had become an open book, one into which all of humanity now rushed, writing feverishly with boundless curiosity. From late October into early November 2025, Atlas no longer belonged only to the science pages. Its presence flooded culture, religion, art, and even entertainment. The world no longer recognized a border between fact and fiction, between orthodox science and visionary imagination. Each new fragment of data from Atlas felt less like an answer and more like a haunting clue, never closing the mystery, only opening new, bewildering doors. In Italy, a research team reported that when they converted Atlas's signal into 3D imagery, they saw a double helix form resembling DNA. It may be a coincidence, the lead scientist admitted, but if it isn't, then this looks like a cosmic business card, a reminder that life everywhere may share the same language. The news spread like wildfire, covered in half-scientific, half-mythic headlines. Atlas carries the symphony of life within its light. In Brazil, a physicist transformed Atlas's pulses into sound waves and played them inside São Paulo's Grand Cathedral. The vibrations echoed across the vaulted ceilings like an invisible choir, moving thousands of people to their knees in tears. A priest exclaimed, "If this is not the voice of God, then at the very least, it is a reminder that we are not alone." And just like that, the line between science and faith, strained for centuries, dissolved as both sides trembled together before the same enigma. Online, theories multiplied like storms. Some believed Atlas was an ancient probe from a civilization long gone, drifting back toward us. Others argued it was a cosmic clock, ticking down to an unprecedented event. Still others claimed the Atlas signal was an ancient form of musical language, proof that the entire universe was a vast, unfinished symphony. No one could prove any of it, but the uncertainty itself became fertile ground for imagination to flourish. Even cautious scientists found themselves unsettled. A CERN specialist confessed, "I know I must stay rational, but when I study the Atlas sequences, they feel like they're trying to tell a story in a language we don't yet know how to read." Instead of calming the frenzy, his words fanned it higher. If even the most rational mind sensed narrative in the numbers, then perhaps the boundary between science and myth had already collapsed. In cafes, classrooms, churches, and boardrooms, Atlas became the main subject more than elections, more than economics. A student wrote on her blog, "We grew up with Marvel, with science fiction films, but now the cosmos itself is writing a story stranger than fiction." Her simple words resonated with millions, capturing the shared mood. We were living inside a science fiction novel authored not by humans, but by the universe itself. Astonishment turned into a collective drive to search. Curiosity hardened into a thirst for meaning. But along with it grew the quiet dread. If Atlas truly was a messenger, did it bring a promise or a warning? Were we hearing a hymn of welcome or the drums of doom? No one knew. And it was precisely that ambiguity that transformed Atlas into the century's most mysterious symbol, a riddle humanity could not resist, even though its answer might upend our entire vision of the cosmos and of ourselves. While laboratories were still busy parsing the signals, the outside world had already leapt ahead. Atlas was no longer just an astronomical phenomenon. It had become a symbol. Philosophers, religious leaders, and artists, voices often dismissed as distant from science, rose to speak, and to everyone's surprise, their words reverberated in the hearts of millions. In Paris, a renowned philosopher addressed a full hall at the Sorbonne. "Atlas does not answer us with language, it answers with rhythm," he declared. "It does not explain, it provokes." And that is the essence of philosophy, to keep asking. The entire hall rose in applause, not because they suddenly understood, but because they felt the resonance. The universe was forcing humanity to think beyond its own boundaries. The world's great religions did not stay silent. At the Vatican, the Pope called Atlas God's courier. He told the faithful, When humankind falters in confusion, God sends a messenger, not an angel with wings, but a shard of the cosmos to remind us we are not alone. In India, Hindu gurus invoked Atlas as a manifestation of Shiva, the eternal cycle of destruction and creation. In Tibet, monks chanted beneath the glow of the aurora, calling Atlas's pulse the sound of the universe. Suddenly, the boundaries dividing faiths blurred, as all trembled together before the same mystery. Artists went even further. In New York, an exhibition titled Atlas, the Cosmic Messenger, drew thousands. Paintings translated radio signals into spiraling bands of color, evoking DNA and galaxies. A performance artist danced to Atlas's pulse, letting the human body sync with the heartbeat of the cosmos. In Tokyo, an electronic music collective turned Atlas's signals into a symphony, releasing tracks that swept through TikTok and Spotify. Young people swayed to the rhythm, half joking, half wondering, maybe we're dancing to the beat of a star. Despite the diversity of interpretations, they converged on a single truth. Atlas was no longer a distant object. It had become a messenger in the collective imagination, not bearing a clear promise or threat, but offering a mirror. In its silence, humanity saw its own smallness, its restless curiosity, and its boundless hunger to reach beyond. The world slipped into a strange state, half science, half faith, half art, half science fiction. A journalist wrote, "For the first time since the Renaissance, humanity lifts its gaze to the sky and shares a single symbol." And it was true. Whether you were a scientist at MIT, a monk in Lhasa, or a high school student in Brazil, you knew Atlas, and you whispered the same name, messenger. But mystery did not diminish unease, it deepened it. If Atlas truly was a messenger, what message did it bear? And if it was only a physical phenomenon, why had it awakened science, religion, and art all at once? No one had an answer, and it was precisely that silence that turned curiosity into longing and astonishment into fever. On the final nights of October, cities around the world held public viewings. People gathered not only to watch the comet, but to murmur to one another, "Are we being sent a message?" An old man in Manila said softly, "I have seen many comets in my life, but never one that made the whole world stop and listen." His words were recorded by the press and echoed across the globe, becoming a quote etched into collective memory, for they confirmed what everyone already felt. Atlas had transcended astronomy, becoming a living myth in humanity's shared story. In just 2 short weeks, Atlas had become the most talked about subject on the planet. Across every social media platform from TikTok and Twitter to Weibo, the hashtag number, Cosmic Messenger, exploded, drawing billions of views. Short videos that transformed Atlas's signals into rhythms spread like wildfire, mingling with serious scientific analyses. The world had never been so collectively curious, as if everyone were reading the same book opened across the sky. In New York, Times Square transformed into an outdoor cosmic forum. Towering LED screens broadcast Atlas's data as pulsing waves. Each time the signal shifted, the crowd erupted in cheers, as though watching the World Cup final. A student in the middle of the sea of people shouted, "This isn't just science, this is humanity's first conversation with the universe." The roar of the crowd blended with the city's blazing lights, creating a scene both euphoric and surreal. In Nairobi, a group of young people hosted an Atlas listening party in a park. They hooked a laptop to speakers, played the signal converted into sound, and danced beneath the African night sky. A journalist observed, "They laughed, they cried, they pointed at the heavens as if chatting with an invisible friend." From New York to Nairobi, Tokyo to Lima, humanity was living a moment of connection unlike any before. But not everyone welcomed it with joy. In Moscow, politicians warned, "This may be a distraction, blown out of proportion." In the US, conservative commentators dismissed Atlas as a fantasy craze, accusing the public of falling for an illusion. Yet young scientists countered, "Even if it's an illusion, it's the most beautiful illusion humanity has ever shared." The debate stretched endlessly, from parliaments to online chat rooms, from scientific conferences to coffee shops. Then came a detail that sent curiosity soaring. A research group in Germany claimed Atlas's signal lasted exactly 24 minutes before repeating. Coincidentally, 24 minutes is the time it takes Earth to rotate 6 degrees, one segment of its daily cycle. If this is random, then it's random in a way that's terrifyingly elegant, a scientist remarked. The line became a headline. Atlas, the universe's clock. Philosophical discussions spread worldwide. A professor at Oxford wrote, "The astonishing part is not whether the signal is truly a message, but that humanity has collectively agreed to treat it as one. Atlas has done what no civilization has achieved. It has forced us to look in the same direction." His words struck a nerve. Perhaps the true value of Atlas was not in the content of the signal, but in its power to turn humanity into a single audience, listening together. At the United Nations, delegates from rival nations sat side by side, sharing data and insights. Images of American, Russian, and Chinese scientists studying Atlas's graphs together went viral as a rare glimpse of global unity. A journalist called it Atlas's silent message. The universe can do what politics cannot. And yet, excitement was shadowed by unease. Some warned, "We are anthropomorphizing a lump of ice and dust." Others whispered, "If this truly is a message, then who sent it, and why now?" The question cast a vague but heavy fear, leaving many sleepless. The world cheered and trembled at once, like children opening a mysterious door, eager to step inside, yet afraid of the darkness beyond. Atlas continued its silent flight, but humanity was no longer the same. People now looked at the sky with new eyes, awestruck, curious, exhilarated and trembling. For each pulse emanating from that plasma halo was like a knock on a door, and no one dared to say for sure, when Atlas knocks, will the door that opens reveal a miracle or an abyss? By the time the fiery debates began to fade, a new mood emerged, not the roar of celebration, but a deep stillness. People started to see Atlas not merely as a cosmic messenger, but as a massive mirror suspended in the void. A mirror that did not reflect physical images, but reflected the human mind itself. Curiosity, imagination, fear, and hope. A philosopher in Buenos Aires wrote, "Atlas teaches us nothing new about the universe. It teaches us about ourselves that at our core, humanity is a species that cannot live without questions." His words were translated into dozens of languages, shared millions of times. Many admitted they shivered while reading, for never before had a distant celestial body made humanity see itself so clearly. In London, a group of psychologists experimented. They projected Atlas's radio pulses as flickering lights in a darkened room, then asked participants to write what they felt. Most did not describe data, but emotions. Some wrote that they saw childhood memories. Others said they saw the faces of loved ones long gone. Scientific signals had become a mirror of the inner self, stirring hidden layers of memory. One researcher reflected, "Perhaps Atlas says nothing at all. It is humanity, in its hunger for meaning, that has turned the signal into a reflection of our own hearts." Across Asia, different philosophical traditions connected Atlas to ancient ideas. Japanese Zen masters called it a cosmic koan, a question that cannot be answered, only contemplated. A Chinese scholar likened it to an unturned hexagram, forcing humanity to accept uncertainty as part of truth. In India, spiritual teachers emphasized, if Atlas is a mirror, then we must face what it reflects, the smallness of humankind within the infinite. In art, the shift from science to philosophy became even more vivid. In Berlin, a museum opened an exhibition with nothing but a single massive mirror. On it were etched the words, "Atlas was never out there. It is within you." Thousands came, standing silently before the glass, many breaking down in tears. Not because they understood what Atlas was, but because they felt Atlas had become an existential question. Who am I in this vast cosmic picture? Public discourse moved from noise to reflection. People no longer spoke about what the signal was, but about what it meant to them. A teacher in Peru wrote, "I teach my students about Atlas not as astronomy, but as a lesson in humility." A doctor in Canada confessed, "In Atlas's pulses, I hear the heartbeat of my patients, and I realize we all share the same rhythm of survival." These simple testimonies spread across social networks, hailed as the collective diary of humanity beneath the cosmic mirror. Even the strict of the Bender name, quite play and not, curiosity did not disappear, but it changed color. It shifted from the restless urge to decode into a quiet yearning to reflect. From astonishment at the mystery outside to awe at the depths within. And in that stillness, many came to realize, perhaps Atlas carried no message at all, but precisely because of that, it had become the perfect message, a reminder that the universe need not speak for humanity to discover the questions it must face within itself. Early November 2025. As Atlas drifted farther from Earth's orbit, its glow dimmed, yet the echoes it left behind grew louder. Humanity stood at a strange emotional crossroads, as if waking from the nightmare of tsunamis, yet also stepping into a dreamlike mystery that opened a new door. Awe was no longer a fleeting reflex, it became a permanent state. Each day, people lived with the same question: what, truly, is Atlas? At international conferences, scientists presented reports thousands of pages long, yet their conclusion was simple: we do not know. That brief admission shook the world, for it acknowledged that the universe still held secrets beyond the reach of human intellect. And paradoxically, the void of knowledge became a source of energy. Instead of despair, people felt exhilaration. For the first time in decades, science was not merely delivering answers, it was presenting a question vast enough to nourish an entire generation. In New York, a writer proclaimed, "Atlas is the prologue to a cosmic novel we are compelled to continue writing. If we cannot understand it now, then it means we must learn more, explore more." Atlas is not a period, it is an ellipsis. His words spread like fire, striking a chord. People do not always need final answers. Sometimes, they only need a door left slightly open. In classrooms, children drew Atlas not simply as a comet, but as a being with eyes gazing back at Earth. In many countries, teachers encourage students to write journals under the prompt, "If Atlas were your friend, what would it say to you?" Thousands of pages appeared online, filled with innocent yet haunting lines. Atlas tells me not to fear the dark. Atlas says love each other before the tsunamis return. Atlas just wants us to look up at the sky more often. In their childlike words lay a profound wisdom, one that left even adults speechless. Philosophers called this the era of the mirror. For Atlas, though inanimate, had forced humanity to look inward. The Japanese scholar wrote, "We do not look at Atlas to understand it. We look at Atlas to understand ourselves." And perhaps that was its greatest gift. Within astonishment, people rediscovered curiosity long forgotten. Within confusion, they found the will to continue. Yet the mystery never disappeared. A Canadian research team continued to analyze the signals and reported a subtle shift at the exact moment Atlas passed closest to Earth. They called it the wink of the universe. No one dared to claim whether it was a coincidence or an intention, but the news alone was enough to send chills through humanity. Had Atlas left us a brief farewell before departing? On the night of November 5th, millions around the world lifted their eyes to the heavens, watching Atlas's final trail fade. No more sirens, no more tsunamis, no more arguments, only silence and the collective feeling of having just bid farewell to a mysterious visitor. In Chile, a young boy whispered, "It will come back, won't it?" No one answered, yet that silence itself made the moment eternal. Atlas drifted away, but it left behind a legacy, a humanity both trembling and inspired, both unsettled and curious. A humanity that now understood the universe was not merely a set of cold laws, but a book of metaphors, where every celestial body could be a chapter, a sentence, even a single keyword, unlocking infinite imagination. And so, as Atlas's glow dissolved into the dark, the world realized it had entered a new journey, a journey uncertain, yet filled with wonder. A journey where every human heartbeat resonated with that enigmatic pulse, together asking the question that now echoed across the ages. Are we truly alone, or is this only the prelude to a meeting yet to come? Mid-November 2025, the night sky had returned to its familiar stars. Atlas, the one that had left the world stunned, bewildered, and trembling, was now nothing more than a faint blur in the distance, slowly fading beyond the reach of ordinary telescopes. Yet paradoxically, the dimmer it grew, the stronger its presence became in the human mind. No more frantic signals, no more violent tsunamis, no more furious debates, only silence, and in that silence, humanity found, for the first time, a breath of space to reflect. In Tokyo, a journalist wrote, "Atlas has gone, but it leaves us with a question greater than all the scientific data. What will we do with the fragility of our own existence?" The question did not sound like a blaring siren. It arrived like a whisper slipping into each person's thoughts, making them pause in the middle of daily routines and look up at the sky. It was one of those rare moments when, after chaos, the world suddenly discovered a shared state of stillness. In the early days of November, across the earth, vigils and prayers unfolded without decree from any government arising, instead as a natural human need. On the shores of the Philippines, where the first waves had struck, people lit thousands of candles and set them afloat on the sea, letting them drift into the open waters. In Chile, church bells rang for 24 hours in memory of the lost. And in New York, thousands gathered in Central Park, sitting in silence, gazing at the night sky as though listening for the fading heartbeat of Atlas. In that silence, a sense of reverence spread. Not the frantic fear of the weeks before, but a deeper awe, the awareness of being small beneath the great machinery of the cosmos. A doctor in London wrote in his journal, "We thought we ruled the earth, yet a fragment of ice and dust from the far reaches was enough to make an entire civilization tremble. And in that trembling, we are reminded, existence is a gift, not an entitlement." Yet within that reverence, hope began to germinate. Many realized that if humanity could survive an unprecedented storm of chaos, if it could transform fear into ritual, data into music, panic into contemplation, then it could also turn its fragility into the very strength needed to go further. Somehow, Atlas had not only cast shadows but had also planted seeds of hope, that from ruins, people might rise again and find new meaning in their journey. In Geneva, a sociologist concluded at a symposium, "Atlas is not an ending, it is a door. When that door opens, what we see is not annihilation, but the very face of humanity, with all its fears, but also with its longing to rise above them." Long applause followed, not to praise him, but to affirm a shared truth, that even without answers, they all felt the same awakening. And so, as Atlas faded from the sky, it did not vanish. It moved inward, becoming silence, becoming reverence, becoming hope. For the first time, after so much turmoil, humanity raised its eyes to the cosmos, not to await the next catastrophe, but to ask a different question. How can we live in a way worthy of this fragile gift called existence? Just days after Atlas disappeared from the visible sky, global media began publishing articles no longer filled with sensational warnings of disaster, but carrying a quieter resonance. Headlines no longer ask, "Will Atlas cause the next tsunami?" but instead shifted to, "Atlas has shown us how small we truly are." The movement from fear to reflection happened almost naturally, as if humanity had collectively passed through a psychological storm and emerged into a stage of awakening. In Northern Europe, those who once gathered to witness the blood-red auroras now recalled their experiences as spiritual lessons. A young woman in Norway said, "I thought I would die when I saw the sky burning red, but now I feel grateful, because in that moment I realized I am only a speck in an infinite canvas, and that's not frightening, it's beautiful." Her words were broadcast on national television, and millions of viewers teared up, as if their old fear had been transformed into a new form of reverence, not panic, but awe before the cosmos. In Africa, many communities far removed from modern technology also held stargazing festivals, retelling the story of Atlas as a new myth. They didn't focus on radio signals or scientific data, but on the shared experience that all people, regardless of skin color or language, had trembled beneath the same sky. A village elder in Kenya said, "We once believed each tribe had its own mythology. But now, Atlas is the mythology of all humankind. Distracting for the free my different chief, which sedly dispeakly, and higher along." Even scientists, the most rational of observers, could not hide the change in their outlook. An astronomer at Harvard wrote, "We spent our lives chasing cosmic signals, and when Atlas pulsed its strange rhythm, we argued endlessly. But now that it has drifted away, I realized the true value was never in whether it was a message. The value was that it made the entire world look up together. It was one of those rare moments when humanity remembered itself as one community, without borders." The global psyche became two-sided. On one hand, people felt more fragile than ever, knowing that a single natural phenomenon could shake the entire planet. Yet on the other hand, that very fragility instilled in them a deeper appreciation, that life itself is precious, that each day of breath, of looking at the sky, of living alongside one another, is a gift. In many places, groups formed to discuss the lessons of Atlas, where people shared not theories, but feelings, learning to slow down, to love more deeply, to shed arrogance toward nature. From bustling cities to small villages, a new sentiment quietly spread, a sense of cosmic reverence. No longer the chaotic fear of collapse, but a wonder laced with gratitude. A philosophy professor in Berlin described it this way: Atlas reminded us that existence is not something given. It is a fragility sustained by countless miraculous conditions. And once we become aware of that, we live differently. Humanity, after weeks of panic over disasters and mysterious signals, now stood before a new threshold in its collective psyche. They no longer asked, "What is Atlas?" in terror, but in reverence. No longer asked, "Are we safe?" but "How can we live in a way that is worthy?" And this transformation from fear to reflection, from anxiety to awe, became a turning point. Atlas, even as it receded into the distance, left a profound mark on the human spirit, like an invisible teacher forcing us to relearn how to live. In the days after Atlas drifted away, the world seemed to enter a period of remembrance unlike anything before. No one called for it, no government issued decrees, yet across the planet, people instinctively created rituals, as if a collective instinct whispered that memory and healing were necessary. In the Philippines, where the first waves had struck, people lined the shores with thousands of bamboo poles hung with paper lanterns. At night, the sea breeze set them swaying, their red and gold lights shimmering across the water, as though the stars themselves had fallen into the ocean. They called it the Night of Returning Atlas. Many families wrote the names of lost loved ones on the lanterns, released them into the tide, and wept in silence. It was not only remembrance but an acknowledgement. Though Atlas had sown fear, it had also left them with a chance to see life's fragility and their bond with one another. In Japan, Shinto shrines held a rare ritual, hundreds of monks striking taiko drums in unison, echoing the very rhythm Atlas had once pulsed. The booming sound, both solemn and repetitive, gave participants the uncanny sense that they were joined to the heartbeat of the universe itself. One attendee said, "In that moment, I no longer felt alone. I felt part of something larger beyond myself, beyond my nation." In South America, artists transformed the memory of Atlas into a new language of art. In Buenos Aires, an installation hung hundreds of small mirrors inside a darkened hall, each reflecting fragments of Atlas's signal cast in laser light. As visitors entered, they saw countless versions of themselves blending with strange pulses of light, as if Atlas had etched itself into the collective memory. One critic called it a cathedral of fragility. In Africa, communities without access to telescopes or data chose storytelling instead. Village elders told children new tales. There was a star that could sing. It came close to reminding us to love each other. Simple though they were, these stories became seeds of memory, planting awe and hope in the next generation, turning Atlas into more than an event, but a living legend. In Europe, many cities held silent evenings for Atlas. At exactly 8 p.m., streetlights dimmed for several minutes, leaving entire cities in darkness so people could lift their gaze to the sky. In that pause, no one spoke, but millions shared a single feeling. Their existence was fragile, yet woven together by this shared experience. A journalist wrote, "Atlas has gone, but we carry it in our memory, not just the fear, but the connection." Tresly Hove to Do 8 in time, these rituals and works of art did not erase the pain, but they reshaped it into something people could hold. They began to feel healed not because they had found an answer to Atlas, but because they had found meaning within the chaos itself. This is how humanity endures, turning tragedy into shared memory, memory into symbolic language, and symbol into hope. As November passed, one truth crystallized. Atlas no longer lived in the sky, but it had become part of humanity's collective memory. A memory preserved not only in scientific papers, but in rituals, in art, in stories, in tears, and in hope. And that memory, quietly, was healing invisible wounds so that humanity could continue forward, with eyes that had learned to reflect, and hearts that had learned to revere. After the rituals of remembrance and the weight of collective memory, a new wave began to rise, not fear, but hope. People realized that if humanity could endure days that felt like the end of the world, then it could also transform that experience into the beginning of a new chapter. Atlas, though only a comet, had left humanity with a lesson. From chaos can come hope, and from fear can grow resolve. In research institutes, the heated arguments over the nature of the signals gave way to discussions about the future. how to build faster, stronger warning systems so that no nation would ever be left behind again. A group of young engineers in Singapore launched a project to design a community-based satellite network, calling on every country to contribute so that no second atlas would ever catch humanity off guard. They named the project Heartbeat, inspired by the mysterious pulses Atlas once released. Philosophers added to this current of hope through the language of reflection. A scholar in Greece said, "Atlas reminds us that we are not the center of the universe, but we can choose to be the center of justice, of responsibility, of connection." His lecture spread online, shared by millions as if it were a kind of spiritual manifesto for the age. Meanwhile, religion so often cast as separate from science joined its voice in harmony. The Pope, in a global message, said, "If Atlas is a messenger, its message is not of doom but of an opportunity to love one another more deeply." Hindu teachers in India preached that Atlas symbolized the cycle of rebirth. From destruction comes renewal. In the Middle East, Muslim clerics called it a sign, reminding us that all life shares the same creator. Differences in belief seemed, for a moment, to dissolve into resonance, as all found in Atlas a shared seed of hope. In daily life, hope appeared in the simplest forms. In Japan, children wrote messages to Atlas during class, expressing dreams of a better Earth. In Peru, coastal families rebuilt their homes, but this time painted spiral patterns on the walls, echoing Atlas's signals, as if to say they were not only rebuilding but rising from memory. In the United States, a movement spread under the slogan, "Look up, live better." It reminded people that the greatest lesson of Atlas was not to bow in fear, but to lift their heads in hope. On forums, many shared how Atlas had changed their way of living. A doctor admitted, "I used to believe life was only about my career, but when I saw the ocean swallow an entire street in minutes, I realized the most important thing is family." A student wrote, "I never believed in anything, but Atlas showed me I need faith not in religion, but in humanity's ability to find meaning even in chaos." These personal stories, woven together, became a vast tapestry of hope, stitched from millions of individual threads. The strange truth was that awe itself became the foundation of hope. By realizing their smallness, people came to treasure the smallest things. By seeing their fragility, they grew closer to one another. Atlas had not given humanity an answer, but it had opened a path from fear to humility, from humility to responsibility, and from responsibility to hope. And so, by the end of November 2025, when the skies no longer carried the comet's light, humanity no longer looked up with unease. They looked up with new eyes, the eyes of those who had once stood at the edge of an abyss, and discovered that on the other side of fear lies the promise of a beginning. As hope spread, it did not remain confined to rituals or emotions. It quickly transformed into action. From vast public squares to international forums, a single message echoed: humanity must live with greater responsibility. Atlas, through its silence and its mystery, had become a mirror, forcing people to realize that existence could no longer rest on indifference. At the United Nations, a special resolution was passed at the end of November 2025, titled the Atlas Commitment. Its content did not center on security or economics, but on sustainable existence, strengthening climate cooperation, expanding global disaster warning systems, and most of all, teaching the next generation about collective responsibility. A diplomat declared, "Atlas showed us that no border can stand against the forces of the universe. Therefore, we cannot allow borders to divide our responsibility." On social media, the movement number We Are Atlas exploded. People posted images of themselves planting trees, cleaning beaches, helping the poor, or simply looking up at the night sky. They wrote, "I do this for Atlas, for Earth, and for us all." Within weeks, millions of small acts merged into a vast current, spreading across continents. No one commanded it, no one enforced it, but the power of shared memory compelled people to contribute. In schools worldwide, teachers created programs called Lessons from Atlas, teaching children about Earth's fragility and the duty to protect it. A child in Brazil wrote in an essay, "If Atlas can send signals, maybe it wants us to take better care of our home." The essay went viral, stopping adults in their tracks, reminding them that sometimes the deepest truths come from a child's words. Scientists, too, shifted their perspective. Instead of focusing solely on decoding the signal, they asked, how can science serve humanity's long-term survival? New projects emerged from clean energy and climate defense technologies to global space observation programs. A physicist said, "We cannot control Atlas, but we can control our own actions." His words echoed like a new motto for science in the post-Atlas era. Religions also turned their focus to responsibility. In India, gurus taught, if Atlas is a mirror, then how should we act so that when we look into it we do not see selfishness and destruction, but compassion and love? In Europe, pastors emphasized, no one can change the universe, but we can change how we treat one another. These teachings did not remain within temples or churches, they spread outward as calls to live more kindly. Even in daily life, the spirit of responsibility took root. In the Philippines, fishermen formed community groups to share information about tides and waves, ensuring no one would be left behind in danger. In the United States, coastal cities tested evacuation systems organized by residents themselves. In Kenya, small villages began teaching children to observe the skies, raising awareness that the cosmos is not distant but bound to daily life. And so, from loss, a new consciousness emerged. Responsibility was no longer an abstract idea but a daily practice. Atlas never spoke a word, but through its appearance and its vanishing, it forced humanity to look into the mirror and ask, how will we live in a way worthy of the fragile gift of existence? By the end of November, as winter settled over the northern hemisphere, millions still lifted their eyes to the night sky, not to wait for mysterious signals, but to remind themselves, we are Atlas, and the responsibility of Atlas is the responsibility of humankind. By the end of November 2025, Atlas was no longer visible through amateur telescopes, yet it lingered everywhere in art, in rituals, in memory, and in everyday conversations. From a distant, unfamiliar comet, Atlas had transformed into a global symbol, transcending borders of nation, religion, or ideology. In Berlin, a group of students painted a massive mural across the side of a building. The spiraling glow of Atlas, with thousands of diverse faces woven beneath it into one collective whole. They called it We Are Atlas. Within days, the image spread worldwide, printed on t-shirts, banners, and even postage stamps. People looked at it and recognized themselves as part of the picture, as part of a story larger than any individual. In Kenya, artisans carved bracelets from wood, etching spiral patterns that echoed Atlas's signal. They called them reminder bands, so that whenever someone looked down at their wrist, they would remember the responsibility they held toward Earth. In the United States, theaters staged a play titled Messenger, retelling Atlas's journey as a metaphor for humanity's spiritual awakening. Audiences rose to tears and applause, not because of the comet's imagined story, but because they saw themselves in it, afraid, uncertain, yet standing together in resilience. Religion, too, embraced Atlas as a new symbol. In the Vatican, churches hung banners reading, "Atlas reminded us, we are not alone." In India, gurus wove Atlas into their teachings, describing it as a wordless message of renewal. Across the Middle East, mosques inscribed Quranic verses alongside Atlas's spiral, as if to affirm that the universe always finds its own way of speaking to humankind. In daily life, the symbol of Atlas grew even stronger. Many couples choose October 18, the day of the first tsunami, as their day of connection, holding weddings and engagements to transform painful memory into a vow for life. In schools, children sketched Atlas spirals on their backpacks, treating them as protective charms. Even in the tech world, startups across renewable energy, healthcare, and artificial intelligence adopted Atlas as their name, a pledge that their work would serve humanity. International media described this phenomenon as the Atlasization of collective memory. An astronomical event had escaped the boundaries of physics to become a living symbol, stitched into the spiritual fabric of humanity. A sociologist wrote, "Atlas is not just a comet, it is a mirror in which humanity sees both its shadows and its light. The power of a symbol lies in the fact that it belongs to no one." Atlas was not the emblem of a nation, a faith, or a single ideology, but of all humankind. Whether you were a fisherman in the Philippines who lost his home, or a student in the United States staring at a computer screen, you had the right to speak its name, to say, "I lived in the Atlas era." It was this shared claim that lifted Atlas beyond every boundary, and through Atlas, humanity saw clearly for the first time. We may differ, but we share the same sky, the same fear, and the same hope. The symbol of Atlas became a red thread, weaving humanity together, so that no matter the separate paths we walk, we all know we belong to a greater story. The story of life in a vast and mysterious universe. By late November 2025, Atlas was mentioned on scientific broadcasts only as a fading dot on an orbital chart, drifting beyond ordinary sight. But in human memory, it had never truly left. If the early weeks of October were defined by fear, and the weeks that followed by confusion and curiosity, then now, at the close of November, the dominant feeling had shifted into deep reflection. In many places, communities organized gatherings not to argue over data, but to speak of meaning. A teacher in Peru shared, "Atlas reminded me that we are only guests on this planet, and when you are a guest, you must live in a way worthy of the universe's hospitality." The simple remark was quoted in newspapers, echoed across social media, and spread as a message both gentle and profoundly moving. In Canada, a group of student volunteers set up a small rooftop observatory, not just to watch the stars but to teach children humility. One child wrote, "I'm not afraid of Atlas anymore. It feels like a friend who came to visit, reminding me to love Earth more." That innocence stirred something in adults, revealing a truth. Healing sometimes begins with the way we retell the story to the next generation. Across Europe, composers wrote symphonies inspired by Atlas's signal, but instead of thunderous sounds, they chose gentle, restorative melodies. These concerts were no longer spaces of dread, but of collective breathing, where people sat together and felt that within chaos there is still order, within fear there is still light. Philosophers concluded that Atlas had accomplished what millennia of philosophy had tried to do, forcing humanity to confront its place in the larger picture. A thinker in Athens said, "Atlas made no promises, no threats, offered no explanations, yet in its silence it delivered the greatest lesson. We don't need every answer, we only need to learn how to live responsibly within uncertainty." Religions also found unity in a single idea. Atlas was not a sign of the end, but a chance for renewal. Prayer ceremonies no longer carried the weight of fear, but were transformed into festivals of hope. People sang, danced, lit candles, and smiled. Atlas, once the image of dread, had become a symbol of healing, a testament that humanity can turn darkness into light if it chooses to see through different eyes. Above all, Atlas left behind a spiritual legacy, inspiration. Across the globe, creativity bloomed. Startups named themselves after Atlas as a reminder that every invention should serve the common good. Writers crafted novels using Atlas as a metaphor for rebirth. Educators wove it into curricula, not as a lesson in astronomy, but as a lesson in life. Humanity was continuing the Atlas story not with telescopes, but with everyday action. At last, when Atlas's light vanished completely from the night sky, a strange feeling spread. Instead of emptiness, people felt full. Because Atlas was no longer out there, it was in here in memory, in art, in responsibility, in the desire to live better. It had become part of humanity's spiritual heritage, like the ancient stars once named by our ancestors, except this time, the entire world had witnessed it together and carried it together. And so November ended with reflection and reverence. No one knew what the future would bring: another Atlas, another challenge, or another opportunity. But all knew one thing: humanity was no longer the same. From now on, whenever people look up at the sky, they will not only see stars, but also themselves within them, small, fragile, yet full of hope and responsibility. Atlas had gone, but its spiritual light would endure, a torch guiding the way toward journeys not yet begun.